welcome to Colors of the Dark. Happy holidays, everybody, and welcome to our top 10 show of the year. Joining me is Elric. Kane, how you doing?
I'm here to
Where's your
celebrate
fest?
survival.
Where is your festive colors?
Eraserhead,
You
black
got
and
an
white.
eraser
In
head.
heaven, everything is fine. That is all you need as a mantra. So that's my Eraserhead. My woman in the radiator. She is my Christmas. So
She's your
she's
Christmas
my
right there.
Christmas.
Just
Yeah.
that's all the carols. So I am wearing, actually, I wanted to wear a holiday sweater for the show tonight. And so we have like a bin of them, like old
Uh-huh.
holiday, like ugly sweaters. And I grabbed this one because this is one of the sweaters from my first film, All the Creatures.
Oh,
Like, do
nice.
you
Yeah.
remember the scene with the aliens where they give her a sweater and then they say,
Yes.
"Do you like it?" And she said yes. And then you cuts and they're all wearing the sweaters. I have like eight of
Uh,
these.
oh,
So they're
interesting.
really hot. So about 10 minutes in, I'm gonna be like, hold on, I gotta go put a horror t-shirt
Yeah,
back
I don't
on.
like the
But
itchiness of those kind of sweaters. Like I can wear them for like an
it's
hour. I don't
acrylic.
like,
Oh, that's it
so,
exactly. It's like this thick because we had to buy like because we had to buy doubles. I think we probably bought 12 of them for that shoot.
mhm.
And so yeah, it was like the cheapest Christmas sweater you could find on Amazon at the time. And they're like this thick, scratchy acrylic. So about 10 minutes from now, y'all, I'm gonna want to break and I'm gonna go change. So, but it was cute to start the show in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It definitely suddenly was a nice burst of color coming onto the screen.
Thank
Um,
you.
So
Yes.
today we are going to do, in a moment, we're going to do our top 10 movies, in quote marks, because who knows with us, of the year. And then we're going to do top 10 other things,
Other
books slash
things.
miscellaneous, because I think that's sometimes where the fun stuff, it's a nice way to break it up. So it's a full bag. It's been a crazy year. It's amazing to
I
survive it.
Yeah, like looking back, I had a lot happen this year that was just absolutely phenomenal. A lot of trials and tribulations as well.
Yeah.
But horror wise, it was a bomb year because we had bomb as in like a good thing.
Yeah.
Not like everything
You
bombed. It
mean
was
from the
like, yeah,
90s?
like
You're
that's
talking like you're from the
the
90s. Yeah. The bomb. Yeah.
bomb. No, it was a good year because we did have this whereas when I was looking back at 2023, we had almost all IP. It was the Scream reboot and this reboot and this reboot.
Was
And
that the year
this
of
year,
the menu and stuff like that? Though there was good
no,
stuff.
that would have been 2022.
Oh, I can't remember. Okay.
Yeah. Last year it was a lot of IP. It was
Okay.
a lot of IP. This year we were pushing away from that a little bit. So looking over my list, there is not a single thing on it that existed beforehand. Like
Oh,
so it's all a lot of kind of new IP that we don't get. Do have some trends I want to highlight that I've noticed
yeah,
this
there was a
year.
lot of
But yeah,
it was at a very brief summary. I would say this is like the best since was it a few years ago that there was just an incredible banger year. I can't remember which year it is. It might have been right before the pandemic.
I I thought it was the year before the pandemic that
Yeah.
we had because I remember there was one year we were doing shockwaves and it was like when I was making my list, it was like 2 pages long and I was really struggling to parse it down.
I have
And
something
I
like
felt
10, yeah,
similar.
like 10 movies in my 10 spot. You know what I mean? Like, so when I started doing my
You're
list,
gonna see how it plays out
well,
on
I
this
pulled them into
show.
the honorable mentions, but like that is very unusual. Like I have
I
so many
love
movies worth mentioning this year that aren't going to be on the list,
same.
which is not
Yeah.
happened. I mean, I also went to a festival, so I was seeing more, maybe more stuff, but a lot of them aren't festival movies, so
I
it's a good sign.
so I didn't include a lot of festival stuff because even like there was one that we were talking about that I'm pretty sure will make your top 10
Mm.
list that I was debating watching, but it's not available wide. So I didn't want to
Yeah,
put it on mine yet. So I'll include it for
I'm not
2025.
including it because I thought if you saw it, it would be on your list, but that's fine. It would be in my it's around it would be in my around 10 spot, and in my guess it would be around your 1 or 2 spot if you see it.
Yeah. So it's this film, I will tell
Yeah,
everybody, it's this film called Dead Talent
yeah.
Society that it's been playing festivals. Everybody is saying it's going to be my number one film of the year,
Which
but
sometimes is a bad thing when people say that because
yeah,
it gets in
because
your head.
now I'm
But
suddenly like it's in my head.
yeah,
But that said, I felt weird putting it on my list, even though that it has played festivals, because it's not going to be available anywhere for months. So I was kind of like, I want to save this list for things that I want to proselytize, that I
yeah,
want to, rave about and say, go watch this right now. And next year I will get in Dead
yeah,
Talent
yeah. No, it's
Society.
fine.
But some of the trends that I wanted to talk about, because these ones won't necessarily come up on my top 10 list, but I was still very aware of them. We had a lot of time loop horrors this year. Did you notice that?
There was a lot of time loop movies this year. It's not.
That's it.
I think that has started. If you go back to the one in Palm Springs,
Palm Springs
that
was great.
right, and that's one of the first ones in a while where there hadn't been any in a while, and that happened in the pandemic. I think.
Same with Something in the Dirt was pandemic as well.
Yeah, but Something in Dirt is like much more of a
It's more
introspective.
mathy,
Yeah,
parallel
it's much
university.
more a true science fiction. But most of these are about going back and fixing something that you wish you could fix, or finding love again, or giving yourself a wonder. Like My Old Ass is a new movie right now, which is
Yep, that
really
was
really
fun.
fun, but it's not a horror movie. But like, there's just so many, and I think it's because people had all this self-reflection happening in the pandemic, where they're thinking about their past, thinking about all the things they would do differently, and I think that creates a wave of movies like that, because and they work pretty well. I think the horror ones have been somewhat disappointing because I think they've been a bit too teeny bop for my taste, to be honest. Um,
So the one that I saw as kind of the top of this trend was tail end of last year was Totally Killer, which I really enjoyed. If
yeah,
memory serves, that was on my top 10 list last year. And that was Teeny Bop.
yeah,
But then this year we've had Time Cut. On Netflix, we had
it's a
Things Will
Wonderful
Be
Knife.
Different. It's a Wonderful Knife. Things Will Be Different, which just came out from Rustic. Caddo Lake, which is on
Yeah, that had a
Max,
loop.
I
Yeah,
think. So yeah, we've just, and then My Old Ass, I just watched a couple of
it's
days
really
ago, and
good.
then I was like, this trend, if it's a horror trend, I was like, man, we're having a lot of time loopy stuff, but it seems to be kind of going beyond
Yeah,
horror as well, which is kind of
I'm a
cool.
sucker
So
for time loop movies.
time loops. I love time
Yeah,
loops.
I'm pretty easy on them. I really like Things Will Be Different. Actually, shout out to that.
Mhm.
That's the editor who worked with on all the Moorhead Benson films, making his film debut, feature debut, and I think it's actually really fun. Really intense. It's a much more serious, darker version, much more like Time Crimes.
The one that I would give a shout out to, I did enjoy Things Will Be Different, but the one that I really enjoyed this year was Caddo Lake, just because I
Yeah.
liked the setting so much. How it's a time loop, but it's happening in this rather impoverished, kind of backwoodsy lake community in Texas. And I just really liked the setting and the characters. And then, I would have watched them in any capacity. It felt kind of Ozarky.
Hmm.
I would have watched them in any capacity. The fact that they were stuck in a time loop just made it all the more interesting.
And it
So
kept you
yeah.
in the dark for a while, which I think's a good thing with a time loop movie. I
Mhm.
think if you're too
Yep.
quick to explain what the hell's going on, it can be the audience can get too far ahead of it. That one really took its time to
Yeah,
kill
time
story.
cut we were in
Yeah, yeah,
immediately. It
yeah,
was very much like, okay, we're in a
yeah.
time loop, people. Let's do this. Yeah. So
But even
that
a movie
one
like
it
that,
just
which I don't think is necessarily a very good movie, is quite an enjoyable watch, even when it's a teeny bop
Mhm.
thing,
It
because its
was.
heart's in the right place. So you then watch it with a different kind of angle. And again, I would be interesting to see someone approach a very hard horror, because that's one thing we haven't really seen, a hard horror version of time, like a really nasty
Like
slasher
a
using
triangle.
time
Or
to go back. And
actually,
Triangle's a
I
good
mean, like we
example,
had Happy Death Day,
but that's
but
not
that
hard. That's still, I
that's
mean, it's good. I love the
it's
Happy Death
still
one.
teeny
It
bopper. It's
is
still really
ultimately,
fun.
ultimately.
Triangle, I think, definitely made it scary. Like that was the
But that's
biggest
a long time
takeaway.
ago now, if you think about it, right? Must be
Yeah,
almost a
no, that
decade.
was like 2000 aughts,
Yeah,
I would say, if not a
yeah,
little before that. But yeah, that one, that's the last one, or Dead End. That's another like
yeah,
super, super
yeah.
small
The
one, but
Christmas
that's another one. It's a Christmas. So just saying, hey, y'all, you looking for a Christmas movie? Time Loop Horror Dead End was one of the last ones I remember being really scary. House at the End of Time. That was from a couple of years ago.
Yes.
It was,
Spanish
oh
language
gosh,
film.
Spanish language. I can't remember what country it came out of. Maybe Argentina. I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't
It
recall either.
wasn't. It wasn't Argentina. I can't remember. But yeah, that said, that one had some really good scares in it
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Okay, so time loops. What else have you noticed?
Time loops. Okay, so this one I wanted to call attention to her because it's this trend that I have been watching evolve in books.
Uh-huh.
And as I've been starting to get some of the advanced copies of books coming out in 2025, I'm like, holy shit, this is becoming a huge book trend.
Hmm.
And I'm seeing it lovingly be called Sporer online, which I
Hmm.
love. Spore horror. It's basically mushroom horror. And I love the term sporer. I think that's just phenomenal. But this year we had You Will Speak for the Dead. We had a great book by Kingfisher called What Moves the Dead. We had one called Bestial Mouths from a couple of years ago. We had one called House of Rot. But then as I've been getting the stuff coming out, we've got The Bane Witch, we've got A Girl in the Creek, and Creatures of Wanton Ruin. These are all, actually, I think Creatures of Wanton Ruin has been out for a little bit. But yeah, these are all kind of like within 2 years that we have seen this kind of surplus of mushroom horror happening in the horror book space. So I don't know. I must confess, I'm fairly new to the horror book space. I've only been really diving in deep for the past 2 or 3 years since the pandemic was when I really started like, oh my God, there's just as much great stuff in horror lit as there is in films. So I don't know if this is kind of like, does horror lit set a precursor for what's going to come in the film world? That said, since I have seen at least 7 mushroom themed horror books come out in the last kind of 12 months, I'm really thinking if this is coming. So I at least wanted to mention it because I'm excited about it. Sporer.
I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that me and my best friend, when we were 8, would every time we'd go in the room, we'd go spores and act like we died. It was like a long running thing that we did. So when you said spores, I was like, I don't think I've heard that word since I was a kid pretending to die.
Mushrooms in general are definitely having a moment. And this is a weird thing to talk about, like bigger zeitgeist right now. But like if you walk into Hot Topic, there's mushrooms everywhere right now. Like just in general, like mushrooms as an icon, as iconography are doing great. Like my daughter has shirts with mushrooms on them right now. She got a mushroom themed book pack this year. Like it's definitely kind of a hot iconography right now. And then I think that coming off of Last of Us from a couple of years ago, the TV show.
Yeah, it's all about spore horror. You're right. That is all spore fungal horror.
22 to 23. I feel like that kind of put it into the bigger zeitgeist of horror. And then it's just kind of spread rhizomatically, using a mushroom term, since then. So yeah, it's something I'm excited to see if there's like some great mushroom horror on the horizon. If you have one, I want to read it. But yeah, the fact that it's existing in book form, I'm like, this is really cool to see this like weird trend evolve just within the last like 18 months in horror lit. So sporer.
All right, spores.
Yeah. And the one trend that I want to track from last year. So last year we saw all of these, what we were calling, and it wasn't just us, it was what everybody was calling liminal horrors. And it's where we were putting things like Skinamarink and the Outwaters. And there was one from a couple of years prior called Dimland. And they're basically kind of backrooms-esque where you're just like meandering through a space and, there's horror, but it's not plot heavy. You're not.
It comes more from the online space because it's more people who are making YouTube videos and stuff set. There's more YouTube content in the liminal horror space than there are movies. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people have been doing that for a few years and talking about it and getting creeped out by like office videos and weird things like that.
My favorite liminal thing that I watch online, and I must say I'm pretty obsessed with these. It's one of my favorite things to watch right before bed when I should be reading books, but I'm like, I'll just phone for a while. Is I watch those like people exploring abandoned places where they're like, I found this house in my town and I'm gonna explore it. And literally the video is just them going room to room in this abandoned space. And there is something so fascinating, calming, and terrifying about it all at the same time. The one liminal horror that I would put it in liminal horror that I felt like we got this year was In a Violent Nature. But that said, I mixed In a Quiet Place and In a Violent Nature together in one glorious movie that needs to exist. But Violent Nature, I felt like was really, really freaking liminal. But that said, I don't know if we got any others and I just missed them.
Yeah, we'll see. When we do our list, some of these things might actually appear, like that we weren't even thinking about. Some of these natural trends might poke their heads up by the end of it. I think there's one on my list that maybe could partially be in that space, but not completely.
Oh, what? I've got one that I'll say is it's somewhat.
But I think that is still a place of exploration. I would say it's not on my list, and it was one of the hardest. It could have been in the 10 spot. Not based on its quality. Its quality is very high, but I just need to see it again before I know what it is exactly. And that's I Saw the TV Glow. That is a person who...
that one feels
liminal.
They
work in the liminal space in the previous movies, but that one is obviously more of a fictional narrative, but it still is definitely obsessed with the liminal and richer TV. And I think it's a very like one of the most interesting movies I saw this year. I just don't feel strongly enough yet about like I need a rewatch. I felt this way for a few months where I was like,
It didn't hit
yeah, no,
me.
well, I like they're aesthetically, I really like the way it looks and
Mhm.
feels, but I don't even know if for me it was horror or something other, which is also cool. I just need to see it again before it would have been able to be on the list, I think. So,
Yeah.
and I know it's the top of a lot of people's lists, so that's cool. And again, when we get to our lists, we have a couple things up top first. These are our personal subjective lists, and they are definitely not meant to be the best. They are our best. So there is no objective best happening on this show. I will say I watched something this week that I did want to mention because it was really cool. I only watched one thing this week because I was obviously getting ready for this thing that we're doing. I watched the brand new horror documentary. I think it was on AMC, which means maybe it was on Shudder. I wasn't sure when I watched it, but it was the J horror virus, which is brand new, came out, and this is just the whole documentary about J horror. And
Oh,
but
I'm so in and
yeah,
knew nothing about
becoming
this.
increasingly upset. Obviously, I saw Ring at a New Zealand film festival before it even got its main release, so it was on its festival run. I saw the original Ring, and blew me away. Like I was like, I have not seen a horror film in a while that creeped me out like that did. And so I'm all in for this. Of course, like all things, it kind of reached a point where oversaturation and then you kind of lose interest. I've definitely swung back to this in this last year or two, and become my favorite thing is to look for mostly Japanese or films from Korea or anything that's in that kind of vibe. But the good thing about this is this is definitely not. Even though the directors might be American, this is definitely the whole documentary is basically subtitles. It is Kiyoshi Kurosawa. It is the director of Ring. It is the guy who directed. It's just them talking. It's mostly talking heads. It's not for someone who I think is very casually interested. I think this is definitely for people who are curious about what happened at the turn of the millennium, where the origins of some of that style comes from, and they really explain it. I mean, even Kiyoshi Kurosawa was like, this one guy made this one Japanese movie that we all liked, and we all were like, oh, we didn't realize you could make a movie in that pace
Hmm.
and that slowness and that style. And so we all wanted to do that. So we started to all kind of work together to achieve this look and created. So it's actually, in some ways, it is kind of a movement, almost purposeful horror movement at the start, which was super interesting to me. And there's about three or four things I did see clips of that the early ones that before things like Cure that I wrote down that I'm like, I am going to be watching those for deep cuts because did not know them. And they were the kind of tent pole ones that led to Ring and other movies
Oh,
after.
wow.
They,
Now I had a couple of years ago on Deep Cuts, I had done like my top, and we even did it as a cheat sheet where I did like the top 10 must-see Tartan Asian
yeah, and
Extreme.
I'm a big fan
Because
of that label
that
too.
was amazing
Yeah, yeah.
DVD label. I still have most of my Tartan Asian Extremes. But
Tsukamoto.
yeah,
So
they
Snake of June was my favorite Tartar one.
love Snake of
So
June.
he's in this documentary a lot, and even though he's not really like he stars in he stars in is it Marabito? He stars in one of the J horrors, but he's not really a J horror. Like he's like on the side of that in a lot of ways because he's just so uniquely himself. But he's really good at talking about them. Like he's talking about how he saw Ring for he's just a fun guy to hear talk. But
I
this was
didn't
fun.
realize that was him in Marabito.
I think it's
That's
him.
like next
He's the
level.
guy taking if it's Marabito or it's different
Marabito's
with
the
the
mermaid one,
photographer,
right? Yeah.
who wants to is obsessed by seeing violence and death. If that's the one, that's him.
Marabito is the one about the guy who finds the girl who's like a creature and he takes her home and chains her
It
up
might be a
and she's
different
like,
one. Yeah, I mean they were all
yeah,
coming. It was all thick and fast, but I'll look it up while we're
yeah,
talking. But
okay.
that one is like I said. I feel bad because I didn't look to see if it was on Shutter because when I go on my streaming, I've got AMC Plus and have Shutter through it, so I'm not sure if it's there. Either
Mhm.
way, I watched it for free, and oh no, it is. I did get that right. It is Marabito.
It is
Shinji
Marabito. Okay.
Sakamoto is the
I
star
don't
of Marabito. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. That's
He's a
cool.
fear-obsessed freelance cameraman investigates an urban legend involving mysterious spirits that haunt the subway of Tokyo.
Yeah,
I
that's
saw that
it.
one a long time ago. That one, slip carved woman, things like that. The only downside I'd say is like I wish it had a little bit more towards the lasting influence on Western films. It definitely, it does the
Mhm.
Ring remake and the Grudge remake. It goes up to that stuff, but I think it's much more pervasive to look at how is it like I would personally add an extra chapter where we could look at A24 and say so much of the A24 aesthetic that's coming from J horror mixed with Euro cinema, like these two strands. And
Mhm.
so, but really cool. And I always like a good doc, a good horror doc. One day, me and you will make one. It's always
Yes.
just about finding something that you're willing to sacrifice years of your life to pour into
Years.
it. It's much easier to podcast. So,
Or can get clips easily. Like I, at one point, I'd even gone to Severin and I was like, I want to do a heavy metal horror doc
mm,
about the heavy metal horror films of the 1980s into 90s. And they were like, awesome. We can't get music rights for any of those. So you'll have
uh,
to do it without music. And I
yeah,
was
that's
like,
lame.
that's important. And so yeah, it was it's just what you can get rights to show in your documentary. And
I
fair
mean,
use
yeah.
is only so good. Like it's because it's all fair use is it's a sticky thing.
Fair use, you could get
Um,
away with almost all movies. But
not necessarily.
really?
It's all about if you have to show it in a new light. So if I'm just coming on and being like, trick or treat, this is a heavy metal horror movie from 1986 and it kicks ass and yay, Sammy Kerr. It can't just be like a celebration of the film. You would have to be stating something about it and showing it in a vastly
Yeah.
different light than has ever been done before. So that's
But
where
those
fair
laws
use gets
change a lot
difficult.
because I know when a friend of ours, Elijah Drenner, made his exploitation one, it was really hard. And then a few years later, I remember asking about this, and he's like, "Oh, it's easy now. People just grab whatever, and you won't be because
Wow.
as long as people are like talking under them or giving it different
That was
context." Yeah,
we could not, that was the thing. And I'd heard this from multiple people as I was trying to get that around was that we could not play the
yeah, that I
songs
believe because
from
music's
the
yeah, no,
movie.
music is
And
a
I
whole
was
different
like,
thing.
that's like the best part
Yeah.
is that music. So yeah. Anyways, so I am going to kick off. I watched a couple of new things, some of which I'll mention in my honorable mentions,
Yeah,
but I
save
at
if it's
least wanted
something
to,
like in the top 10, save
yeah.
it for the mention.
So I did want to mention Love Lies Bleeding
Oh
just
yeah.
because we
Yeah.
covered it on the show the first time. It's not a horror
No,
film in the traditional sense, but it does get hyper violent. This, I agree. Elric and I were talking offline before the show that this would probably be in my top 5 films of
yeah.
the year.
It's definitely mine. Definitely.
Just based on content and plot and how hyper violence it gets and messaging. Like I just loved every minute of it.
And one of the
But
best like follow-up movies by a director that you wouldn't think this would be the follow-up movie.
oh
Like the
yeah, no,
substance from Revenge to Substance makes total sense.
yes,
But from something as subtle as Rose Glass's first film, what is the name that just
Saint
Saint
Maud.
Maud, like beautifully made, but like so restrained to this, it is an
Yeah.
awesome freaking leap. Like really exciting.
So Saint Maud, and I will say I saw Saint Maud in the first act because the first act of Love Lives Bleeding, I was just like, somebody do something. Like it had that same like slow pacing
Oh
that
my
gives me
God. We have
anxiety
such
attacks.
different ideas of slow, of what
Oh
slow
my
is.
God.
That to me, that's not slow.
And so yeah, the first act of Love Lies Bleeding, it definitely moved a little slow for me, but then by the second act, it really started picking up, and then the third act just exploded. So I wanted to mention it just because if even if it's not, if there's not ghosts popping out and nobody's head's gonna fall off. But that said, it was just a really damn good movie, and I feel like that, it was hyper violent. So there is definitely a crossover. The other one that I wanted to mention that I just watched was Blink Twice. And I
Yeah.
wanted to mention this one because this was not marketed as a horror film. This was marketed as a thriller. And so I had not watched it during the initial run. And I remember you and I had discussions because we were going to the movie the weekend that this opened and we were like, let's go see something. Well, Blink Twice is playing, but it doesn't look like a horror film. And so we bypassed it. And so I remember you had caught it a couple of months later when it came to
Yeah.
VOD. And so I decided to go ahead and watch it. This is such a fucking horror film, even to the point of like having elements that, seem otherworldly, not supernatural, just, a lot of suspended disbelief to make it happen.
But still in the Get
This
Out
is
frame. It's in the Get
yeah,
Out
it's in
for
very much
sure.
in the Get Out
Yeah.
frame. And so, yeah, like I get why they didn't market this as a horror film because it does have this really sharp political bend to it. That might have been off-putting to horror audiences, but that says this is a total horror film. And it's really hard to talk about without giving away twists. So I will just say it is about a girl who has been down on her luck. She's kind of floated from job to job, who, while working at a high-powered dinner event that she and one of her best friends are working at, she gets to meet this like high-powered CEO who's owns all these tech companies and pharmaceutical companies. Like he's this big pharma bro, is the best way I could kind of describe him, but he's supposed to be altruistic and super, have all of these morals and everything. And he falls for her and invites her and her friend to his private island with a bunch of friends. And that's about as far as I can take it. But yeah, I loved this movie. It will not make my top 10, but there was a lot of great stuff in this that I deeply enjoyed. And it was definitely for me, this was like a straight horror film.
I will say, I think this year, one of the things that separates is yes, it has its great festival films, its great indies, the great like arty horror films. But what separates it from some of the recent years is the bigger tentpole ones are largely successful. And that's so
Mhm.
rare. Usually you
Yeah.
get one or two. I feel like there's five or six movies of that blink twice quality where you're like, wow, this is a really good, entertaining, fun movie. And a couple of them will make our lists. But that's to get that many, I think is quite surprising. And
So
yeah, I left some big ones off my list that I would easily have kept on a top 10 any other time. So,
I have theories of why I think that is happening.
hmm
Is over the past couple of years, we have proven that a film that could do okay on streaming platforms can do gangbusters theatrically. And I think that Terrifier 2 was one of the catalysts that like kicked that off. I feel like Late Night with the Devil was another one this
hmm
year, where Late Night with the Devil is the type of film that 4 years ago it would have gone to streaming. It would have gone to streaming. Horror fans would have gone ape over it. For a very small grouping of us, it would have been like, top 10 of the year and things like that. But seeing how well it did theatrically this year, I think that we're seeing that. We are seeing studios be aware that there is a potential market there for releasing what would have been these streaming releases to do limited theatricals. And so we've seen more of that. And even when I was looking over my list, like another one that won't make my top 10, but like Azrael did a theatrical run. And that is amazing because it is something that, 3 years ago I would have viewed as like it's a Shudder original, it kicks ass. But the fact that it is doing these
Oh,
limited
I thought it
theatrical
wasn't
runs.
doing. I thought that one didn't get. I knew it was meant to, but then I thought it was straight to streaming. That one.
I swear that one did a limited theatrical.
Okay.
Hold on. I will Google this, sir.
Yeah, the only reason I bring that up is because I thought it was on the cards, given that its budget and scale and actress. But I thought for some reason it just went straight to Shudder. I definitely started at a festival, but
No, it definitely played at
hmm.
AMC's. It may have been limited, but it did play at AMC's. So with that,
Well, the release
yeah, like I
strategies
think,
are just different. We're obviously seeing, success with Late Night Devil and violent nature of independent films
mhm.
being placed in a certain amount of theaters and just, which is exactly what we want. I think it's because horror films are still an event. Even small independent horror films can feel like an event to a moviegoer. So therefore, that's what you're looking for if you're going to bother going to a movie theater. You're either going for tentpole or some sort of, ride. So I think horror is really outlasting a lot of other genres, which
Yeah.
is good.
No, and horror has owned the box
Yeah.
office, or at least we have proven time and time again, starting with last year, but then really growing this year, that horror will make money at the box office. That where, other films might be hit or miss, cool, Blake Lively explodes, but then some of the Marvel films didn't. Horror time and time again seems to have a really good track record.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're gonna get into our top 10 because we have two top tens to do.
Yes.
And we obviously some of these we've talked about a lot, so we won't necessarily be going along. Are we going to enact Bromley rule? Or
We are
yeah.
enacting
Yes.
Bromley
Okay. So
rule.
if one of us, so for the people listening for the first time, even though we've been podcasting for over a decade, where have you been? Thank you for joining us, and I appreciate your time. But
We appreciate that you've joined us, newbies.
Patrick Bromley, who is one of the Earls of Chicago, he has a podcast called F This Movie, and I don't even know when this became a thing, but on his list making, he would always say if two people are talking, if one person's going to play a title higher, let's table that
Higher.
conversation for when it's higher, and then both people can talk about it. So I will say from experience, having now done this with you probably for 10 years of top tens or so, I believe some years we have very few in common. Some last year, I believe we had very few. I can't recall, but my
We only had
two.
two last
So
year.
usually we
Yeah.
predict at the start. I'm predicting
I'm
three.
gonna go four.
Okay, okay. So either way, I think it'll be around. I think our number's close. Just guessing from a couple of these things.
I'm writing it down. Four
And
same
I'm saying
titles.
three. So whoever gets this right gets to host the show for free by themselves in January. It's
That
gonna be very
doesn't
exciting.
sound as fun.
I know.
I was gonna say take me bowling or
Okay.
something, but
Okay. Well, all
okay.
right. One of us will go bowling. The other one's recording a show by themselves, wearing one of your Christmas sweaters. Okay.
I got a box full.
You
It's
got a
cool.
box.
It's cool.
So we are going to do our top 10. We have the Bromley rule. Obviously, for me, the 10 was the hardest spot because I felt like, well, I'll tell you, from six up to one, I feel are all ones I like love all six. Below that are ones I think are really solid. And then the 10
Yep.
spot was like, in the end, I just put one on that I wanted to keep to place in the conversation, but there was like 10 other movies that it could have been because they're all, and we'll wait for the honorable mentions. What about you for
Yes.
10? Do you want to kick us off?
I will kick us off, and I'm starting us with you knew at least one of the nuns was going to go on here, and I'm
Uh-huh.
kicking us off with Immaculate. So it was a toss up for me whether I went with
Uh-huh.
First Omen or Immaculate, and I had to sit here and break down what I liked about both of
I did the
them.
same thing, by the way, but I broke the other way, so this is good. So we are
This
doing
is
we're doing
great.
the
This is
bit
great.
correctly. Okay.
Doing what we should be doing.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So I went Immaculate because this one I found to be a little bit more shocking. I will say I thought First Omen was shot like hell, like just
Yeah.
beautifully shot. It was just a visually feast for the eyes. It did a lot of trippy stuff. I loved Immaculate because it was so fucking off the chain. Like it just felt so wild seeing it. We had gone to the Beyond Fest screening and it was just both of us sitting there, just mouths agape, trying to figure out what on earth was going on. And the ending, like this was just a baller fucking movie. And one of the biggest things for me was Sydney Sweeney, because I can't remember much about the performance in First Omen. What I can remember most is the visuals, but I will never forget Sydney Sweeney in this movie. So that's what made me put it here. I thought this was so fun.
Yeah, it was hard
And
leaving it off mine because I do feel like both of them were in my top five all year, basically. Like they lasted till the very end and then saw a lot of movies. I think it's just it does get to a point where you're like, I'm not gonna put two crazy nun movies that came out the same week on my list. But
yeah,
I felt like Immaculate was in a way the better told story,
yes,
but the other one is and I'll talk about it in a minute, obviously, but I think it's one of the best directed movies of the year. Like, period. Somebody
it
said one of the
is.
top
It's
three directed
beautiful.
movies, I'd be like, First Omen is up there. It's and
It's
if it
beautiful.
wasn't an Omen sequel and you just didn't have that element at all, and it was just a crazy night, it would have probably been like in vying for the top couple spots. So we'll talk about that one soon. Oops, I almost broke my TV. But but I like Immaculate too, so I'm glad it made the list in the end. So that's good.
Yes. So that's my 10.
Okay. Some reason the Merriam-Webster, because I almost knocked over my computer, the Merriam-Webster popped up onto my computer. I'm like, I have no idea why they're trying to become a dictionary to me. It could be because the first movie on my thing is not a word that anyone's used to saying. So at number 10, I just had so many films that I wanted to put in the spot, but I went with one that I've heard the least about. I've only heard a couple people really like it, and I think people will really dig this movie. So I thought, put it on the list, get people to check it out, and that is the Vordelak. This is one that,
I remember you talking about this, but yeah, I have not seen any coverage on
yeah,
this.
Ted Geoghegan posted about it a few months ago that it was his favorite thing of the year, and that's probably what triggered me to just like watch it just for a weekly episode. And it really it works for me. For one, I'm kind of into this myth. I really like Night of the Devils, the Italian horror film. I think it's one of the great like underrated horror films, and that's a Vordelak story. Obviously, we have Mario Bava's Black Sabbath is the
Mhm.
Vordelak story. A lot of people don't know, but like when we go on these deep dives on Val Luden, we always talk about him. His first kind of paid gig before he started producing movies, he wrote a short story called The Vordelak for Weird Tales, the magazine, and I actually have tracked that issue down and bought it. That's how much of a nerd I am. I was like, I want the one issue of Weird Tales with a Val Luden story, which was cost me a little bit, but it was worth it.
I was going to say that had to set
It,
you
it
back to
wasn't it
school.
wasn't free, but it was on eBay. But so I think it's Vordelaks are so this story is written 50, 60 years prior to Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is pretty amazing to think about because also, by the way, before we go too deep, neither of us have seen Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. By
Nosferatu.
the time of taping this, we have missed all the preview screenings, and so it's not going to be on this. Partially might have been why I wanted this on the list to
Yeah.
to get a different vampire take.
No, we're going to the WGA
Yes.
screening on Friday, but
Yes,
yeah, we're
if we
taping
make
this
it in,
2 days
it will be
beforehand.
on our next deep cut before the end of the year. So,
Deep cut,
but
yes.
because I really want to see it, but it is amazing because the Vordelok is more something that attacks kind of the whole family. It's like it's basically like a vampire type myth in usually in remote places, probably coming about because people were living in remote areas, and it would basically infect one person and then infect a whole family, and they'd all become these blood crazy things. So Night of the Devils is this great movie about it, but this is kind of a classic movie. It opens with this like marquee guy who's all dressed in those fancy Marie Antoinette type garbs, and it's like where they paint the face white and they have the white wig and they have the frilly things, and he's kind of walking through the forest.
A
Yeah,
dandy.
yeah.
I don't
No, he
actually
is.
know.
It's a mixture of the whole
Is
thing.
it it's like Baroque. I'm
Well,
trying to
it's kind
remember
of
the
somewhere
name of
between
it.
Barry Lyndon and the French emissaries. Anyway, he's meant to be bringing this message to somebody in a different country or in the rural parts, and he's from France. He's from the court, but in the rural areas, no one knows what the hell. Why does he look like this? And he's crashed, and so he's looking to for a place to stay for the night. And everyone's really creeped out. They won't let people in. He ends up entering this house where their father is going to look for a missing son because there's a war nearby. And there's a thing that if you don't see somebody for 3 days, or there's a certain time period, almost like an incubation, I guess, of the Vordelok myth, then you know the person, it's not them anymore. It's this Vordelok. And again, it's pretty faithful to the Black Sabbath version, but it's so playful because basically he gets into this house. I think you would really like it because unlike most horror comedies, and I know you prefer them to me, usually horror comedies, this is on that edge
Mhm.
where it's still scary. And it's not
Ooh.
ha ha funny, it's more like amusing, but man, it's creepy as hell because what they do. And this, if you don't want to know anything, don't listen, but I think you kind of need to know this to hook, and I did talk about this earlier in the year. They use a crazy, weird, full-size puppet to play the Vordelok. And so it's not a person, and it looks like an emaciated Klaus Kinski's Nosferatu, but it's this weird. Look it up, you'll see it's not a normal puppet, it's not a funny puppet. It is creepy as fuck. And every time it comes on and it starts infecting the people and infects the guy's dreams, and he's getting involved with his family, it's just a really solid, interesting, off the radar. It's a French movie. I think it was put out by what's the company? The Oscilloscope Beastie Boys. One of the Beastie Boys started. Oscilloscope put this one out, and I do think people should check it out. Again, it's definitely weird and it's a period piece, but it's not taking itself quite as seriously like as an Eggers period piece, and so it's a lot more playful and weirder, I think. So I do think you would enjoy this one, Vordelok.
I really want to see this just because I had done a lot of research on
Mhm.
Vordelox. Previous, this is actually an interesting fact that apparently back in the day, people believed that the only way to stop a Vordelak was to shove a brick in their mouth when they died.
Mhm.
And then they wouldn't be able to remove it and they couldn't bite anymore. So there's been actual historical instances of people unearthing
With a brick.
bodies that have bricks shoved in their mouth. And I found that so back in probably 2009 or so, the show The Vampire Diaries was coming
Uh-huh.
out. And they wanted to do this like televised documentary fun thing. This is for that network. And it was called Why I Love Vampires. And it was this like little hour special that they did before, I think it was Vampire Diaries, where they brought in a bunch of horror experts and they were supposed to talk about the history of vampires. So me being like research nerd, spent like 2 weeks prior researching vampires in every single culture. So I remember that little nitpicky fact about the Vertilac. And then I get in there and it's like shiny vampire or dull vampire. Why do vampires have such good hair? And it was all these very kind of ephemeral, flaky questions. And I was like, let's talk about the Vertilac. So yeah, I'm fascinated by the mythos. So I have this one on my list. I'm sad I didn't get to, but I'm glad you put it on yours.
It's funny because it reminds me. I saw one. These bullshit stories you always see on Facebook every day about some celebrity thing, and one of them was about Robert Pattinson, where I guess he recently was on a taxi or something, and the guy said to him, "Oh, you're in those like vampire movies. Why'd you stop acting after that?" he apparently he said, "I'm Batman," as his response, and I thought that was pretty cool.
That's brilliant. That
I
is
don't know if the story's true, but it made me laugh. So.
I hope to God that's true because it needs to be. And now I have to Google what the vampire thing I was in because I'm like, I think it was just called like, I love vampires. Why We Heart Vampires. And it's
Pretty
from
much, yeah.
2013. So it wouldn't have been Vampire Diaries. I cannot remember what TV show was leading up to it, but there was some TV show that oh gosh, it's got Zoe Deutsch in it and Patrick Lussier.
This
Wow,
is
they
no
weren't
time to
there on
look
the day I was
backwards.
filming.
We
I
have to go
know.
forward to our number 9 picks. Our number 10 are locked.
Our number 9 picks. Now you have to find Why We Heart
Okay.
Vampires. Because I haven't seen it ever. But moving on to our number 9 picks, I went international with this one. And this very much speaks to our own personal taste because whereas Elric dug, slow moving films, I am like throw things at me and keep it moving, and that's why I picked Mads,
Oh yeah.
Mads. So I must confess, I'm not a zombie person. Like I like zombie movies, but it's nothing that I seek out. It's not one of those subgenres that I'm like, I will see every zombie movie quite the way that I am with like aquatic horror, cults, or satanic movies. But this one, somebody had told me that it was really fast paced, that it was about a drug. That intrigued me that it was about a drug and it makes you trip. And I was like, okay. And the fact that it was supposedly filmed in one take, I will always watch a gimmick. So I decided to check this out, directed by David Moreau, same person who had done Them back in like 2000 something. It
Yeah.
was like, it's been a while. It's been a while. So I was glad to see him return to horror. And it opens with a teenager who goes to see his drug dealer, and the drug dealer's like, I got this new thing. And the kid takes the drug and then starts driving home. And on the way home, something happens. This girl kind of bursts out of the woods. She's clearly hurt. She attacks him, and he keeps going. And then the whole night takes a surreal turn with drugs and this spreading infection. It is filmed allegedly in one shot. Most of it all being kind of like a follow, like tracking POV, which is really cool. And this one, it does not slow down. It shows how whatever this thing is moving from person to person and the effects of it. And it never, I love it because it never stops to explain itself. Never at any point do you get and the symptoms are, but you see it evolve. And it is a very distinctive disease that I can't even call zombieism. I'll just call it a very distinctive disease that feels like a zombie because it is spreading like a disease. But it's not, no one's decaying. There's no one walking around moaning. This is not Romero-esque.
But I guess
It's
their
a much
minds are
different thing.
decaying because I have no clue.
Yeah.
And somebody's
Yeah.
hunting them. I mean, it's pretty unexplained, a lot of unexplained stuff, but that's fine when it's a one take and it moves
Yeah.
so fast. It was definitely a near miss for me. But I think if I'd seen that on the big screen, it was one I regretted me and you not seeing when we are down at
Yes.
Texas. I think it would have been landing in a top 10 for me if I'd seen it on big screen because I think it would have been like, whoa, how do you do that? At home, it's still cool, but
It's
yeah,
still
no,
cool.
it's still
I
cool.
watched it on my TV in the living room and it
Yeah.
still definitely was really cool. So, Mads, it's fun and it's fast.
My number 9 was one of the most entertaining movies I saw this year, and it's one I had zero interest in seeing. It's the most surprising movie of any movie I saw this year, and that is Speak No Evil. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
this movie I just was almost not going to go because of the trailer. It's a rare Blumhouse inclusion in here for a while. It seems like it's been a little while since I've had one of them on my list, and I just thought it was such a good adaptation. I enjoyed it more than the original. I think the original still has some great bleak moments, but the ending of this movie was where I was just so happy because I was like, oh shit, is this going to end the same? And then it just gives you this whole other 15, 20 minutes at the end. I think McAvoy gives one of the best performances of the year. Scoot McNairy's really good. Everyone's really good in it. I didn't realize the other wife. So there's Mackenzie Davis, who we all know,
Hmm.
but the other girl, who's James McAvoy's kind of controlled partner, is Ainsley Franciosi, and she is the star of Stop Motion, which is also another one that was
Oh
very
my
close.
gosh.
When I realized that's who she was, I was like, well, she's great. So, yeah, this is just a very dark, funny film. If you still, I mean, most
Mhm.
people who have done what I did, they're like, these trailers, blah, I've seen it. I don't need to see it. And then watch and go, oh my God, this is such a fun movie. Do yourself a favor. This is definitely one of the more fun ones I saw this year. Speak No Evil.
Excellent. Okay, taking us to number eight. Number eight, I went with a TV show. As we said, this top 10
Uh,
list is both films and television. And then our second list will be like everything else. But number eight, I went with a TV show, and that is Hysteria.
oh,
This is another one that people had been messaging me about, telling me repeatedly that I had to see it. And I wanted to include at least one TV series
uh,
on this list because I have From was phenomenal this year. I'm going to talk about Grotesquerie when I talk about my honorable
mhm.
mentions, but Hysteria definitely is the one that would make my personal top 10. It's set in late 80s, 1989 in Michigan, I believe, and it's a local teen is killed and what seems to be like a satanic ritual because there's all of this symbolism around. And all of a sudden, this high school metal band that like has a satanic image is immediately kind of blamed and thought to be connected with it. And then the whole town starts getting pulled into this, and it becomes the satanic panic in a small
Hmm.
town. But at the same time, something actually supernatural is happening, and you realize there's more death. You realize that what is actually killing people is not roving packs of Satanists, that there's actually something really supernatural happening. It's got Bruce Campbell playing the local town
That makes
sheriff.
me happy.
This is just really fun. It's I won't call it comedic because at no point is it actually going for comedy. It's just very aware of how ridiculous some of the townsfolk are. So it's got kind of a Coen Brothers feel where you are supposed to like, kind of see the hilarity of the personalities at the same time. This was created by Matthew Scott Kane, who I believe we're going to have on the show sometime next year. He was the showrunner on this, and we've been chatting, and I told him I will always talk about satanic panic horror movies. So I think he's going to join us sometime in 2025 to talk about satanic panic horrors. So
That tends to be when
yeah,
I
but
watch my TV is like when we're down for a while
mhm.
because I don't feel like watching movies suddenly because I've just been doing all these top lists and stuff. So I'll probably watch that one.
So I need you to start watching television because I need somebody to talk about it with because I don't like horror films. I can always talk about online, but then like Grotesquerie, I'm kind of convinced I was the only person who watched it.
Hmm. I've heard a
Because
couple people, but yeah.
as much as I'm like, I really need to like decompact this show and like break it down and talk about it with somebody. None of my friends watched it.
I
So,
started watching The
um,
Penguin 2 nights ago because I was done with all my movie stuff, and I was like, finally, I'll give this thing a shot. And I'm like, all I want to do even right now is I need to finish watching whatever that show is because it is quite good, freaking
it's
good.
good.
It's really well
It's
made,
good.
and I was like,
I
oh,
haven't even
get into it.
No, I've walked through the living room while it's been
Yeah.
on because Dave and Marnie have been watching it. So I've just merely walked through the living room and found myself standing at the railing, just going, huh, huh. And then
Yeah.
10 minutes later, I'm like, fuck, I have to get back to
Yeah, it's
work.
not a superhero
Um,
thing at all. It's just a total Sopranos, basically.
yeah.
Okay, my number eight, I won't go long on because we just talked about it, but it is my Nun movie, and that means First Omen, directed by Arkesha Stevenson. Unlike you, though, I will say I very much remember the lead performance here. I agree. I think Sydney Sweeney's it's more like she's almost in some sort of camp fun.
Mhm.
But Nell Tiger Free, who is the star of the M. Night Shyamalan show about the babysitter who's
Not Severance. Oh
yeah, it's
shit.
a
Why
name
can't I
like that
remember
for
the name?
Apple. Uh,
It's Servant.
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 Yeah, she's the star of that. Well, she's the villain of that, or the centerpiece of that. And I had become quite interested with her. I did actually try to cast her, and she was on something because she just instantly was like, oh, she's probably on this. Now they think about it timing wise, but I think she's really good. And so I think her performance though is like one of those great performances that are largely also because of the its play with the filmmaking style. The two things. She's definitely channeling a Johnny a little bit towards the end, maybe
Hmm.
a little too literally for my liking.
It's
Yeah, in the
literal.
last act when it gets to reference point. But I think Arkesha Stevenson announces herself as like an exciting director with this, and this I just found it. I didn't really care about the story because by then we had already seen Immaculate, so it definitely suffered being second. So having just seen Immaculate and then a few weeks later we're watching this, we're like, wait, didn't we just see the story? Because if you read the actual plot synopses, they're very similar. But I
Hmm.
like how weird stylistically this gets, and then of course it goes there with a demon birth that is like next level. How did you show that on screen? People will be talking
Yep.
about it in documentaries 10 years from now. So anyway, First Omen's on the list, even though I think they're both very solid. So that's my number eight, and that takes us to number seven.
My number seven was not only one of my fave films of the year, it was one of my most memorable theatrical experiences with you. You were there. Do you think I should go to Italy?
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, so I just teed this one up with the performance.
You did. You totally
Nice.
teed this one up. So my number seven is stop motion. Now this is one of those where it ran festivals in 2023. So if you Google it, it says
Yeah, but it's
2023,
still
but it
2020.
did a bigger theatrical in February of 2024 with Elric and I there. Now Elric and I, this movie is amazing. It's a body horror. It's kind of a personal character study. I loved how insane it got. Like this is the type of film that I'm always like, I want to write this, but I don't know how they would ever find funding. And the answer is that it's, made elsewhere,
Mhm.
where they have beautiful tax incentives and things like that. But yeah, it's a girl, it's a character study on a girl who is following in her mom's footsteps to be a stop animator and starts becoming so obsessed with her work and doing it correctly and perfectly that she starts going insane and starts using her own body parts in it. So yeah, it gets really, really body horror and really intense. I love this. This was like a Saint Maud for me, but it wasn't nearly as slow because I had issues with Saint Maud and how slow it was.
Mhm.
But it's that level of like a character study. Now, why this was my favorite screening of the year is Elric and I had gone to this, and we had actually gone to this because there was something else we were supposed to go see, and we
Yeah.
went to the wrong theater. We were supposed to
Yes.
be at like a press junket,
Yeah.
and we had gone to the wrong theater, and we were like, fuck, we're not going to make it to the correct theater in time. Let's just see whatever's playing. Oh, look, stop motion's playing. Let's go see it. And we go in and it's sold out. And we were like, wow, this is sold out. It was like a packed crowd. And we were sitting next to this girl who spent the
Oh no,
entire
they came in like
time.
20 minutes late.
Oh, they came in 20
Yeah, yeah.
minutes late. And the very first thing she does is she sits down, she leans over to Elric and she goes, what did I miss?
Yeah.
Like he's going to give her like a full recap.
It's like, well,
She
she's following in
talks.
her mother's footsteps as a stop motion animator. And no, it's like it was very, and these weren't they're young. I mean, your impressions made her sound like she's 80, but she was probably like 25 or something. And,
No, she was young.
yeah.
She was young. And they talked through the entire movie. They kept trying to talk to us, which was
Yeah.
very weird. And then anytime that somebody was not talking to her, she would pull out her phone. And there was literally one point where nothing was happening. It was dead silence. And at like full volume, she goes, we should go to Italy. And then she pulls out her phone and starts Googling locations
Yeah.
in Italy. And it was very frustrating, but it reached a point where Elric and I were laughing
Yeah.
at how kind of just I will write that character in a movie at some
Well, and the
point.
crazy part is we
Yes.
are actually going to Italy with them. And so we have a holiday planned. Me and
And we're
Becca, we're
going to
going to
Italy.
Italy
So
with them.
yeah, we totally were
Yeah.
following their plans and we're off and it's going to be great. So thank you, couple. We're going, no.
Yeah.
That said, this movie was awesome. So awesome that sitting next to that could not ruin it, that I still walked away and went, that's a really good fucking movie. So stop motion. You can now see this on Shudder.
Yeah, and that one was in my 10 spot for the longest time, and that's where I put forward to like again, it's really good. It's got a really good creature, and it like
Mhm.
actually is quite brutal as it goes. It's not
Yes.
a it kind of goes there by the end. At my number seven is the least possible on the paper me movie, and I just kind of loved it. It's the most charming thing I saw this year. Fell in love with it, and I hope more. And this is kind of like I think Dead Talent Society is the faster paced version, but similar kind of winning formula, which is humanist vampire seeking consenting suicidal person. Very long title. I probably wouldn't have watched it based on the description. I'm the type who would probably get, probably not for me. But my friend Oren, whose taste I do trust, he was like, this is the best thing I've seen all year. He loved it. And I was like, oh, okay. Didn't sound like something he would love. And it's a Montreal based film. So I had just come back from Fantasia. I think it was like a week after I got back from Fantasia. So I was like, oh, I want to see a Montreal based film. And it is so freaking good. It is like kind of got like, the always easy comparison is saying it's Wes Anderson-y, but it's this young vampire, teen vampire, or now she's probably 20 or so. It's her birthday. Her parents are having a party for her. You don't realize she's a vampire in that moment. They bring home a pizza guy and then they kill him and they're all going to eat him as a family. And she's like, I still don't want to do it. So basically she doesn't have it in her to kill, and that she's too sensitive and they're really worried about her because she's living off blood bags and things they give her. But their whole family and her sister, they're all successful surviving vampires, and they're very worried that she's becoming kind of anemic and emo, and she's kind of withdrawn. And she's played by this actress, Sarah Montpetit, who only reason I brought it up is because last year one of my favorite movies was a movie called Falcon Lake from Montreal, kind of an
Hmm.
art film ghost kind of thing, and she's the star of that too. So I thought that's very cool. Anyway, the hook of the film is one day she's coming home and she sees a guy from the bowling alley standing on a roof looking like he's about to jump. And so basically what it is a story of her, someone who can't kill but needs blood to feed, and a guy who's thinking about ending it all. And then he's like, well, why don't, you kill me? And then we can both, I want to die. And if you find somebody who's consenting, then it's not really killing. And they are creating relationship. Obviously, romantic complications ensue. It's
Oh.
really fucking good. It's like one of those movies that you can't. Here's the thing though. I did not continue watching What We Do in the Shadows, not because of quality. I just fell out of it, and I love the movie. I watched the first season, and I just never saw any. So for me, there'd been a couple years of not watching something like this. When I see this, I don't know if it will play as well to someone who's in that world a lot, kind of comedic version of a vampire story. But this is a very good film. So I definitely want people to watch it. One more time with the title: Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person.
Nice. Okay, number 6. I was definitely going to include a spider film on here because much like Nun films, we
Yeah.
had 2 of them
Both
this
good.
year.
Both good.
So both good. Gift from the gods down upon me to
Mhm.
get my nuns and my spiders all in one year. I enjoyed Sting, but spiders don't sting. So I was kind of like, okay. No, I
That was an
loved.
alien, remember? That spider was
Oh,
an
that's true.
alien,
That's an
alien
alien
spider. So
spider.
anything can be
So
written off.
it could,
Yeah.
it could. But that said, I think I enjoyed Infested just a tiny
Uh,
bit more. They were both good, but yeah, Infested was the way that I went. And I went that way because every other spider film in the world takes it a little silly.
yeah.
It takes it in a tone of arachnophobia, where it's not necessarily played for comedy, but there's a comedic tone to it. Infested did not do that. Infested took it as super serious, scary movie. And I loved that. Infested, French film about a guy in a very kind of rundown, depressed area of Paris who is just, he loves bugs. He has dreams of opening a bug zoo with his friend, and he just absolutely loves them. The opening of this is really cool. Actually, I'll back it up to the cold open because you see these Middle Eastern smugglers trying to get spiders out of the ground, and one gets bitten and like dies immediately, and then his suit or doesn't die immediately as soon as he gets bitten. Everybody comes up and starts hitting him with a machete, so you're like, oh my god, what does the bite do that you have to kill him that quickly? And then it basically flashes to the a store where these spiders have been delivered to be sold as pets. And this kid who's in an impoverished area of Paris, lives with his sister, buys one and takes it home, and it gets out and starts procreating with other spiders and spreads in a Paris, rundown apartment complex. And it's awesome. And I love this because it did take it super seriously. Some amazing creature effects in this as well got nominated. I can't even remember if it won the Chainsaw Award, but it was definitely nominated. But yeah, this one was just absolutely a blast to watch.
It feels like Wreck. I
It
feel like because
does.
it's apartment, and by the end it has a very Wreck like last act, and so it's.
Yep.
No, I thought this was a really good film too, and so I like that one got on the list.
And they used a type of spider because immediately I was like, what type of spider is that? Because a lot of times, if they're doing like a scary spider, you use like what's called a southern button spider, which looks like a giant, like black widow, but they're not, they don't even bite. They used huntsmans, which are actually from your end of the
Yeah,
world.
Australia
So,
Huntsman,
yeah.
Australian Huntsman.
Mhm.
But they cold open is in a. Well, don't they have a part that's in a country in like Iran, Iraq,
It's
yeah,
Middle
Middle
East.
East,
Yeah.
and
When they're getting all the
which means they're
spiders.
kind of channeling a little movie that I'm one of the stars of called Camel Spiders.
Camel spider. Yeah.
So go back and look at that movie and push
Exactly.
pause for a couple
Weren't
frames.
you on both sides of the
Yes,
war, that like weren't
I'm
you
an
a
American
military
soldier, and
personnel?
I'm like a fundamentalist, whatever quote marks Jim Wardowski was thinking that day. You know, Middle Eastern soldier shooting back. Yes, that's how he rolls. It kind of worked, you know. I can't say the whole movie worked, but that was a sci-fi original. Camel spiders. There were no spiders
Camel
when we
spiders.
shot, but I guess some post there was. Okay, from six.
Infested
Best,
is great.
best.
Don't watch Camel Spiders. I mean, you can watch it and cheer
Yeah, you
Elric
know.
on, but Infested is great. Also on Shutter now.
Yes, and watch Sting and watch even Eight-Legged Freaks before you watch Camel Spiders. So, my number six. So from six onwards, these are all true favorites. Five up are like I love. Six is one of my just favorite feeling movies. That is number six, Oddity. On your list or not?
Higher.
Okay, hi. Okay, so we have our first Bromley rule. So I will say
Yes, and
no more
I'm
about my
marching.
number six, but I love it.
I am marking it as one, as
Yes, our
not my
first.
number
Yes,
one,
our
but
first.
our first similar pick.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So
So going to
Oddity
my
will
number
come
five.
soon. Yes.
My number five, The Substance.
My number five is The Substance.
Oh hell
And
yes.
we can
Okay,
talk
so
about
that
it.
is now
It could also be my number.
two.
Let me just say before you talk about The Substance, all I'll
It's gonna
say
be
about
one.
it is this is my favorite thing I saw on a screen this year. Like in a
Yeah.
theater, this was closing night of Fright Fest, and it just the fucking roof blew off, and we were in the side room, not even the main room. It just is so much fun on screen. I haven't seen it a
Mhm.
second time. I think in the long run, I'm more likely to watch this movie than any movie on my list again and again. You know what I mean?
Same.
So even though it's at five, it's also kind of like definitely a very high five. So
This is a high five for
yeah,
me as well, because even though I did, there were films I wanted to place higher just on my pure, like, what I
taste.
will
Yeah,
take away from it. I love The Substance and I love jaw drop body horror.
yeah.
Like that is just it every day is jaw drop body horror. And it is, the type of stuff that I will always watch. So The Substance, I assume most of our listeners have heard of this, but if not, it's about Demi Moore who happens upon a substance that's supposed to, kind of bring out a younger version of herself. And we'll stop there. But what made this movie for me was the style, how it feels like it's set like 10 minutes in the future.
Yeah, right.
And but somehow in a world where exercise shows are the number one shows on network
Well, it's like it's
television,
1980, but slightly in the future. That's how it
but
feels.
slightly in the
Yeah,
future. Yeah, it's like Jane Fonda
yeah,
era 1980, but slightly in the future. And that there is no explanation. That's my favorite part.
yeah,
Okay, my favorite part's the body stuff, but there is no fucking this movie at no point feels the need to explain shit to you. And
yeah.
it doesn't. It just throws you in and what's happening and why this thing is happening and how that thing happened. They don't need to explain it. All you need to know is it's just going to keep building on how shocking it can get, and it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And the two performances are like perfectly in line with
Mhm.
each other. You have again, if you don't want to hear anything, push ahead. I think everyone's heard of this. They all know by now Demi Moore is the star, and Margaret Qualley's playing a younger version. And there's a sequence where one person is punishing the other through something they're doing that I think is like the best thing of the year. Like just so smart, so funny, so real. How people punish themselves, but like in this movie, they're literally doing it to a different version of themselves.
Yeah.
Dennis Quaid's very funny, and the last act just is off the rails, pure society off the rails, fun. Yeah, it's gonna have a long shelf life, and most impressively, because when I start Fright Fest, I was like, oh, horror fans are gonna love this. Well, it's gone way beyond horror fans, and this has been a
Oh yeah.
huge hit from Mubi. So it brings Mubi, who are very much an international streamer and have a much smaller profile in America. I think it really helped them have a bigger profile here in the States because they got all the theatrical for this, and it's doing very well theatrically. It just shows that a good, stylish, exciting movie can transcend all these things, and it's about
Yeah.
something, which is great.
No, this definitely has transcended because even just looking at like the people that I teach with at USC, they are the academy. Most of them have won Academy Awards. If not, they're on the board at the academy. And so they don't watch a copious amount of horror. They watch the academy films. But having them come up to me and say, Hey, horror girl. Okay, they don't call me that, but yes. Hey, Bekah.
Nicely
What did you think
condescending.
of? Yes, I know. No, it is. I'm like the weird horror person in the department, but getting that, like having them come up and be like, let's talk about the substance. Like they're excited to talk about it with me because they have not seen stop motion and Mads, but
Yeah.
all of them have seen the substance because they heard so much about it. So it has transcended into this higher cinema world, which I love.
Well, and
So
it's a
yeah.
movie star. I mean, Demi Moore
Mm.
was a real deal movie star. Hasn't We haven't seen much of her the last 15, 20 years, and then suddenly you give them a role like this and they go to town with it. Like I
Oh
think
yeah.
when the Academy rolls around very soon, these are the kind of things I'll be looking for is like, do you include Demi? She's not going to win, but if you nominate her, I think everyone would feel good about that. Everyone would, and I think
Yes.
Margaret Qualley too, personally as a support. Anyway, big fan of this one of the best follow-up movies in a long time and a lot of
Okay.
new talent. But you're back to you because we were tied on that one. So you're number four.
Is Oddity.
Okay, so now we can talk about Oddity. Well, I get to bring it up because I was at six. All I'll say is this movie's great. No, I what I loved is that
I think we get to talk about it together here.
well, I love that it felt like an old Amicus film. Like instantly, I had a feeling that I don't think I'd felt with a modern movie in like a long time, where it felt like it was from a different era, a different type of horror
Mhm.
film, somewhere between Fulci and Amicus. And I really just instantly was like, "Ooh, I like this feeling." As we get into it,
This is an Irish horror film, and this for me by far had the scariest sequences of the
yes,
year.
yeah, the opening
This
was
was
great.
the heart, yeah, the opening, the scene with her in the tent. Like there was just some really, really good set pieces in this. So when I look back and people are like, scariest horror of 2024, Oddity was it for me. This is the one that left me going like, holy shit, what's gonna happen?
And
And
super
yeah, you're right.
intriguing. I mean, it was a so there's a woman at the start. It works so well because you actually don't know the context. It's just some woman in a
Yeah.
house, and some crazy person comes to the door, and you don't know. And the crazy person saying you should come out, and you're like, don't go out there. And he's saying no, there's something worse inside, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
God. Then we realize that there's been a murder. We realize that there's like a psychic woman who runs like this antique store. So suddenly it feels like a total. That's where the Amicus kind of vibe comes
It
in.
feels like a completely different
Yeah,
movie, but
and
yeah.
eventually we get to this weird creature that remind me like it was kind of creepy in the way that Terrified was a few years ago. It's this like wooden man, and I think that's the most iconic like horror figure to me of the year in
Yes.
terms of an iconography. And this is a a Shutter film, and I think it's a real winner. And I think most people who are into classic horror, I think this was one of the few new films that kind of reminds you of those feelings. So yeah, I
Yeah.
like that.
And this again, terrifying. So Oddity.
Oddity. So you're
Also on Shutter.
Yes, that's where I said it was, right? Yeah, sure. Okay,
Okay.
so that was your
Which
number four,
that was my
my number
number
six,
four.
my
Your
number
number
four.
six.
So my number four is it's somewhere between four and three. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. And I watched it a second time with my friend James when he was visiting because he hadn't made it to New Zealand. And that is Strange Darling. Okay.
Nice.
So
It's on my
Okay,
runner-ups.
so this is one of my favorites of the year, and it held up very well under rewatch. Obviously, a very different movie. I won't say much. Has two of my favorite performances of the year, and that would be the combo of Willa Fitzgerald and Carl Gollner. It starts with a couple outside a motel who have just met each other, deciding whether they're going to embark in a night together. And the one line she asks him, "Are you a serial killer?" And Carl Gollner looks a little, how do I answer this? And has this very dark tone. In the first 20 minutes, there is a tone where you're like, almost too dark. It goes up to the line of like, oh God, this is taking like a sexy 90s thriller and then pushing it just a touch too far where you're really not comfortable. And then twist after twist starts rolling out, and you realize why this is such a fun movie. Very artistically rendered by Giovanna Ribisi as the cinematographer. It's one of the best color palettes of the year, just beautifully shot, very colorful. And it's a nice throwback. It's a movie that, had it come out in 95, maybe I wouldn't notice it as much now because there was a lot more movies like this back then. But these movies
Mhm.
are maybe making a comeback. The erotic thriller, if that's even what this is. This is a little more twisty than that, somewhere between a
This is
serial killer
yeah.
thriller, erotic thriller. It's got
And
both.
it's definitely got an artistic kind of surrealism mixed up
Yeah,
plot to it
color-wise,
as
yeah.
well.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So what really makes this thing is how they deliver the story. The story's simple,
Mhm.
but because they chop it up into chapters, and I was worried that wouldn't hold hold up for me on a second viewing. But it kind of the second viewing is actually very fun because you have all the cards. But yeah, really like Strange Darling, and excited to see what they do next. So that is for number three.
My number three is also international, Exhuma.
Oh, I like that one a lot. That was good.
Yeah, this was by far one of my favorite
Mhm.
viewing experiences of the year. This is a South Korean film about a really wealthy family who feels that they've got this newborn infant and he's very sick and he's not getting over anything and the doctors can't help him. And they bring in this kind of shaman who they feel like there's something plaguing him, like some type of ghost is plaguing him, and it's spreading. Like other members of their family have had it as well, so they believe that there's something kind of more sinister that is spreading amongst their family, like a curse that is causing this newborn to be sick. So they hire this particular shaman to go figure out what is going on, and she brings in a feng shui master and a mortician, and so they all team up together to kind of chart this family's legacy and figure out what it is that could be plaguing them, what thing from their past is plaguing them. And it somehow functions like a buddy cop film,
Mhm.
but they're investigating spirits and different types of hauntings and grave diggers. And yeah, this was just, it was a lot of fun. And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's got traditional kind of South Korean story elements. It brings in samurais at one point, but it's just a lot of the characters are what make this, how those three characters function together. It feels like this really interesting international kind of take on Ghostbusters. And but not Ghostbusters. Like it's a very South Korean sentiment of storytelling. It does not feel Hollywood in any capacity, but it is just kind of like this mix of different characters pushed together to solve supernatural crimes. And it just really, really worked. This ended up being one of my favorite ones of the year. And I was not expecting it to be. I had watched it because one of my South Korean students had told me how great it was, and that it was coming to Shudder. This is back in the summer. And I ended up absolutely loving this. So, Exhuma.
Yeah, I remember watching it because I had heard a lot of comparisons to the way the whaling unfolds, and it's
Mhm.
long. Whaling's obviously a slightly darker kind of piece,
Much
but it is
darker.
really
Yeah.
fun. I thought it was really one of the better films for sure. Okay, number three is the movie called Long Legs. Oz Perkins, not on your list?
Not on
Okay.
my list. I had it top of my
Okay,
honorable
good.
mentions. It was literally the first
Yeah,
one.
this for a long time was number one, and then I just saw a couple things that I are just like a little bit more me. But I will be most curious. This is the movie I most wanted to rewatch before finishing a list because I was like, how will I feel on second viewing? Because there's so much mystery and intrigue about what is Nicolas Cage going to be like in this movie? What does he look like? That went a long way on that first screening, but I also have a feeling I might enjoy just watching it more in coming times. Obviously, it had the greatest marketing campaign of the year. Got everyone to go to the theater to watch this as like very artistically rendered piece of filmmaking, but it also opens like Silence of the Lambs, so it just gives you what you already know for like 20 minutes just to capture you, and then it starts to unfold in a very different way. I think Micah Monroe is obviously solidifying herself as yeah, it's the
Amazing.
great young actress, but Blair Underwood was a real surprise in this, like from L.A. Law back in the day, and Alicia Witt is another big surprise outside the Nick Cage, and she's fantastic in this.
Mhm.
It didn't hurt that I just watched the documentary about Zodiac, the Zodiac killing. It definitely is taking a vibe from Zodiac in this movie and a
Yeah.
feeling. But I think it's again, it's not quite for me. It's not quite on the level of like Black Coat's Daughter for me personally of Oz's, but it's his next best film so far, and I think that's exciting. So hopefully he's getting on. I mean, we'll see with his King adaptation that's coming out very soon.
Yeah.
I'm very curious. In fact, I think I just got an invite to one of those where they don't know you're a horror person. They just think I'm a normal human who watches.
Oh, the
Yeah, one of
screening.
those
You
ones
get
where
to
they're
go
like,
to like
"We're
a
doing a
test
test," and I
screening.
got one of those invites, and they said, you won't know what it is, but it's a new Stephen King thing with a monkey." And I was like, "I'm pretty sure I do know what it is."
I've taken my daughter to some of those. So I
Yeah.
saw Beetlejuice on that back in like the spring.
Oh, that's fun.
And we can't talk about it on the podcast, but yeah, I've gone to one of them, the
Yeah.
test
But
audiences.
I did.
That's
I
fun.
won't go to those ever again because the one time I've told this before, but I saw Fury Road like that, and it was just, it made me so I couldn't
Mhm.
watch the movie for like 5 years because it was all green screen and I thought it was the worst movie I'd ever seen. And then I was like, 5 years later, finally watched Fury Road because I just was resisting because it was so bad. And I was like, okay, that is not the movie I watched as a test screen. Like it was such a big difference. So,
I saw The Strangers with a completely different, it wasn't ending, it was
uh,
just a completely different like tone.
huh,
Like they recut it severely after the
interesting.
test
Yeah.
screening. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it for
Um,
friends, obviously, but I'm not going to do it for movies I want to enjoy anymore. But I think this is a terrific and interesting and like strangely offbeat, especially with the cage of it,
mhm.
movie. And I'm glad. Any other year probably would be number one. So
I liked Long Legs better than Black Coats. Like it really worked for me because it was so unhinged, it was so
yeah,
bonkers. It felt like he was channeling like a 1980s glam metal star,
yeah,
but somehow it was rooting itself in like this very quiet religious horror. So, and I love that it much like the substance felt no need to explain anything.
yeah.
Like we literally walked out and we were sitting next to another film critic, Billy Ray Bruton, and Ryan Spindell were both there. And I think it was Billy Ray that we walked out and I was like, I don't understand how that thing happened. And he was like, well, that doll did it. And that was it. And that was all you needed, was that was the explanation, is okay, well, that did it. And it was so vague, but it totally, totally worked.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are now
We have
down
two
to
so
number
far.
two.
Yes, and I promise that my number two is not going to place higher on your list because I know you and I begged you just to watch the trailer. I said, Elric, just watch the trailer for this. Just watch the trailer. You're absolutely going to love it. It's amazing. And you never did. And that is Has Been Hotel.
Oh yeah, still don't know what that is.
Yeah, yeah, you
It's
still
a
don't have a
cartoon,
fucking clue
right?
what
It's
that
a
is.
cartoon.
It's a very adult
Okay.
cartoon. It's a very adult horror cartoon,
Okay.
which if you now walk
Okay,
into
horror
Hot
girl.
Topic,
I'll be the
it's now
condescending
a
USC professor.
if you walk in, no, they don't call me that.
Horror girl.
No, no, horror girl. No, but if you walk into Hot Topic right now,
Uh-huh.
the whole thing is like decorated and has been a hotel. So it is very much kind of grown
Uh-huh.
this little feverish cult, mostly of like 15-year-old girls, but I'm happy to be a part of that. So this is and I will put this at 2024. So the actual series started, the pilot came in 2019 on YouTube. And this was a slow release on YouTube as a YouTube show. But then this year, it got picked up by A24. A24 started doing releases of it, and it made it to Amazon Prime. And so that was I need to cut that.
What
Hold
part?
on. No, no, no. Never mind. I don't. I was gonna say this wasn't A24. No, this was totally fucking A24. Ernie, leave that shit in.
Hmm.
It's A24. Okay, sorry. Just making sure because I was 90% sure this is one of the ones that A24 was doing
Hmm.
these kind of cartoon series with. So yeah, there, Elric. See, it's A24. Now you have to watch it.
Okay.
But this had been so Vivian Madrano, who's known online as Busy Pop, had released Has Been a Hotel, Hell of a Boss on YouTube. Those are two separate shows, by the way. On YouTube, it had been growing steam for a couple of years. Then A24 picked it up, sold it as a series to Prime, to Amazon Prime. And that's why I'm putting it at 2024. And that's why it has exploded. Is in January of 2024, the entire first season of Has Been Hotel aired on Amazon Prime. The story is about a character named Charlie Morningstar, who is the devil's daughter. She is Lucifer's daughter. And she has this belief system that the souls of hell can be redeemed. And so she builds a hotel in hell to redeem souls. And she tries to strike a bargain with heaven to say, like, if I can redeem the souls, will you consider letting people ascend? And heaven wants nothing to do with it. If anything, they create this kind of plan against it to start killing people, because the way that it works in this world is once a year angels descend into hell and start striking down sinners. It's how they keep the numbers in hell from getting too large. And if they kill you when you're in hell, you're gone. You're just gone forever. And so they do this like massive culling of souls in hell every year. And so Charlie's trying to mitigate that. She's saying, like, but we can redeem people and we can send them up to heaven. And it is so horror fueled. And then it's also got these like warring demons, kind of like warlords in hell that are all going against each other. One is like the demon of film, there's one that's the demon of pornography, one's the demon of radio. And they're all media based and they're all kind of warlords going against each other because Lucifer is losing power. And it's a fucking musical. This is so goddamn good. I have not recommended this to anyone who did not walk away saying, holy shit, that was amazing. All I'm asking you to do is watch the trailer.
Then I can't watch it ever because what if I don't feel like okay, I'll watch the trailer.
You need to just watch the trailer. It's
I
great.
feel like I did see a couple frames, or maybe you showed me in person some, and it did look fun. Or maybe a student of mine was watching some at school
So
once.
this
Yeah.
is, if you are like age, because my daughter's super into it. So I'm going to say like 12 to 20 right now. This is exploding.
Yeah.
But it is so horror fueled cartoon musical, black comedy. It's just brilliant. And it's very smart, or else I wouldn't be talking about it on the show.
Yeah.
It is very smart. So Has Been Hotel got renewed for a second season. So yay. This is my number 2. This was like some game-changing shit for me. And I'm still singing some of the songs from it. So really good.
Well, I'm singing the songs from this next one. It's the exact opposite. You need to have some friends, some friends to watch this movie. You need to go to the dark internet to watch this movie. I am talking about Chime. It was my number 1 most of the year, and then just the last couple of months dropped to number 2. But it just is utterly fucking phenomenal. It's only 45 minutes. It's directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa, one of our greatest living directors. It was high on my list when I had to watch it the very difficult way, which was
I was going to say,
like
this is the one no one can see.
Well, you can see it. You just have to be willing to pay some sort of other currency. I had to rent it from using yens from somebody rents it to you. I only first discovered that it was even possible because I think Travis Stevens had done it, and that gave me enough. I wanted to watch it for a long time, but he had somehow seen it. I was like, okay, well, if he paid for it, it must be illegal. So somehow I did it. I don't know how much it ended up costing me. I think it cost me like $5, but I'm paying a second user who has rented it from the distributors, and that was the model they went for. So it's one of the most unusual
When has
processes.
being legal ever stopped you from
Well, new
watching
movies. I'm talking about new movies. I don't buy. I don't steal new movies.
No, that is a thing.
Yeah,
We
I,
do not
I pirate movies or whatever that are unavailable. You know,
If
stuck
it's
on
40
VHS.
years old, and
Yeah,
nobody
whatever.
can
Just
find
if it's
it.
unavailable.
Yeah.
But this movie is basically, I think it's his best. For me, it's the best thing, maybe even since Cure, in terms of just it is. It is
Ooh, that's
the. It's
bold.
the same feeling. It's only 45 minutes, but here was the cool thing. So I saw it there, and I just loved it. And then at Beyond Fest, they did a whole Kiyoshi Kurosawa retro. And one night they played this on the big screen on film, I think, with his new film, which was not a horror film. That's why it's not on the list, but it's a very fun movie called Clouds. And this it really brought it home how fucking good this is. It is like perfect. It's like this, it is a a teacher teaching at a chef school to people. I think he's teaching people who aren't intending to be chefs. It's more like for fun that they take it. And there's this one guy who's a little weird, and he's always kind of hanging at the back of the class, and he's not doing a very good job. And then he's kind of distracted, and then he's like, "Do you hear that sound? Do you hear that chime?" And the teacher's like, "I don't hear that." And then he goes back to his work, and then at some point turns around, and that student is now hacking one of the other students up with the knife and just killing them brutally. And you're like, no idea why, all because he heard the sound in his head and something was growing. And then the next day, something else happens. And then eventually, by the end of the story, is the chef starting to hear some sound. And it's what Kurosawa taps into so well in all his best stuff, or his horror stuff, is like the everyday, ordinary routines, and then adds just something is off. And there's a slow dread is somehow coming through the pores of the real life normalcy. There's a sequence in this where someone's just getting rid of aluminum cans for a long period, and it just starts to make you feel unsettled. It is so stylized in his classic approach and very formal, and it just makes you feel unsettled. And I think it's very much a film for the moment. Feels very somehow about some fear or malaise that is happening in the ether about things. Again, there are ways to see this movie that are legal, that you are renting it. It's just a different kind of distribution model. I'm sure at some point it will get a proper American release, but I just loved it. I thought it was a truly original film. And again, it's 45 minutes, but it feels like a full meal. I didn't feel like I needed it to be extended. It felt like it was the right length for whatever he was trying to do. So it's unusual in multiple ways, obviously. I think he made 3 movies this year. He made Cloud, a remake of his own film, Serpent something something. I've forgotten a film he had made a few years prior. This time he made it in France, and then he made Chime. So pretty cool for a 70-year-old to just be rocking. So
Wow.
Chime at number 2.
Okay, moving to my number one. I assume it's at least going to be somewhere on your list,
Yeah, are
maybe.
we
My
down to, so
number
we might
one.
only have one in common. Wow. It happens
Yeah.
some years. I have a lot of
No,
honorable
no, no.
mentions.
We this will be our third one in common.
What? What did we have in common?
Yeah. Oddity
Yeah.
and the substance.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So this is our third
But
one.
we don't, wait, we don't
So,
have a third one yet. You haven't said the title yet.
oh, okay, fine. My number one film of the year is Heretic.
No, because in the end, I was down to it was either going to be my 10, it was either going to be that or the James McAvoy one because I think they did similar things for me, and
Mhm.
even though I loved Heretic, it's fucking great. I just decided to not. So no, so we won't be sharing. So you take us to
Oh, so we
town.
only got two
That's
this year.
good.
Wow.
That's good.
My number one film of the year was
It's great.
Heretic. This one I thought was just absolutely phenomenal. Such a smart
Mhm.
script. I love that the first act of the movie is just dialogue. Even I even say close to the first half of the movie is dialogue.
Mhm.
And it's so goddamn scary and terrifying because you know something's coming. It is just talking, but you know something's coming. And it is just, Hugh Grant is just so captivating in this. And it is just so clever. And even when it goes full heart, it turns into a completely different movie, but it is still good and holds on to what it was from the beginning. This movie, there was just so much in it that I found to be just really clever and eye opening. So, Heretic, it's about two Mormon girls who are doing their, I don't know the technical term for it. I did right after the movie because they talk about it, but the year that they spend doing kind of it's
Their mission.
their mission
Yeah.
where they have to go from door to door trying to bring people to the Mormon church to talk to people about Mormonism. And they show up at Hugh Grant's house and he lets them inside and it gets weird. And that's where we are. So yeah, this was by far my number one film of the year. I walked away from this just going, holy shit, that's a fucking movie.
Yeah, it's really good. And definitely, again, another performer who I'd love to see recognized at the Oscars this year. Okay, so my number one is again, this is talk about personal taste. It is interesting where some years it's close. This year for me, this one's like kind of like a clear winner for me. I don't think you didn't think much of this movie. This I think wasn't just my favorite horror film; it was my favorite movie of the year, and I think it's one of the most like it's really. I think here's the thing: I think the line between a movie engrossing you and not is so subtle sometimes that it could just be one scene that doesn't click and then suddenly you're out of something. But this is the only movie I saw all year where I was mesmerized. Like 1 second in, I was like, could not stop thinking about this movie, and that is Red Rooms, the Pascal Plante one. And I know I'm not like I've had when me and you talked about it, I had one person write to us and he was just like, "That's fucking boring. Nothing happened." And then I had side conversations with friends. This is everything's happening. Like you don't. I mean, again, it depends on your taste, and I get it. But there are things that, if done right, now you have to really pay attention to. If you were half paying attention to this movie, you will not get this movie because this movie is basically about an internet model who's very successful, lives a very solitary life, and is there's something off about her, but the whole movie you don't know exactly what that is. She becomes obsessed with a high profile murder trial that's going on of a guy who in Quebec who is being tried for killing these various young blonde girls.
Mhm.
And this woman is you see her play squash, you see her kind of day-to-day activities. It's interesting because there's some in the setup of my film that reminded me of the setup of this, but obviously I hadn't seen this till way after we already had shown the movie. And at a certain point, you start to you don't know, and I don't even want to ruin it. And even now, even when the movie ends, there's certain things where I'm not 100% sure. There's certain things, but it is very fucking dark. And I remember talking to Travis Stevens about this one, and he put it really well. He said it might be the most evil film I've ever seen, and because at its core, where it goes by the very end, there's this idea. There's a couple scenes that could be interpreted different ways. So that might not be some,
Mhm.
but it gets so dark. There's a scene where I laugh and then I go, "Oh fuck." if that's what this movie's about, then this movie's totally fucked. There's a couple showstopper scenes towards the end, but it is a film about patience because it is about her. Basically, it's about her routine that you're watching, and she starts to like bid on a missing video that could prove whether the killer is guilty or not. And she is using cryptocurrency, and she's in a very much a different world. So this is like a dark web movie for sure. Again, the performance by Juliet Garapi, somebody I'd never heard of before. I was just in, and I was kept going. Is this where is this going? I don't know exactly where it's going, and I
Mhm.
sometimes that's a special feeling. Sometimes it doesn't work, and I was just fucking in on this movie. I know it won Fantasia the year before this, and then just finally came out now. So it had already been, but I had never heard of it till just before it dropped. And so yeah, for the rest of the time, this when I do my list for Pure Cinema too, it's going to be my number one film of the year there too. So it really made an impression on me. Now, will I watch it a lot more? Probably not. I'll probably see it another time, but it's not like The Substance where I'd watch it for fun. It isn't that movie, but it's rare for the film. If it, like Kiyoshi Kurosawa, though, I think this guy's made a movie in a style that is like there to kind of mesmerize or not. You're either in it or you're not. So that is Red Rooms. If you haven't seen it, don't get mad at me if you find it boring, and if you think it's the best thing of the year, great. I've
This
talked to
one
both.
for me, it was highly disturbing because I did feel that that it is the cruelest film of the
Mhm.
year, that it is like super dark and twisted. Which it does so subtly. Like you
Yeah,
have
it's
to
very
read so much
subtle for the
between the
whole thing. Yeah,
lines to get that.
yeah,
That said, it was good.
yeah.
It was really, really good. This film was doing something really smart, just moved a little slow
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me. So
Well,
yeah.
and you would have to. I mean, again, I wish I'd seen it in a theater because then you don't have to worry about concentrating. It is a
Yeah.
different thing when we're at home now because we are doing. Sometimes you're doing other things. I watched this one like on my laptop on my lap, and so I was very like, it was just me and the screen, and I was very plugged in to it.
So that probably eliminated one of my frustrations
Yeah,
with the movie, which is I felt like I was watching somebody watch a screen
there was some of
because
that. Yeah,
much of the movie was her hacking and finding video footage and things like that. And that's what I kept thinking is like, it feels like I'm watching somebody else watch the internet. And I feel like if I was watching it on a laptop, that might not be the case.
yeah. No, who knows? But it is, and again, this is the one that it's not quite liminal, but it's obviously discussing dark internet stuff. But it's also about like there's a girl who's like lining up outside and is all obsessed by him, kind of like you'd be a Manson fan until you
Yeah, the killer
yeah, until you
aesthetics.
understand what that person really does, and then suddenly you back off because you realize this is fucked up. What they actually do, they aren't heroes. They aren't rock stars. And whereas our lead character, it's like a lot more gray. What her interest is. I think the first half of the movie, my thought was, oh, she's a previous victim of this person, and she's going to
Hmm.
do something, and then that theory maybe falls short, and then something else emerges. So I won't say more than that. It's just a very fascinating film. So some quick honorable mentions. It's just we won't go into story. Let's just mention them before we take a quick
Really
break.
liked Monolith.
Yeah, I thought that was I actually that's another one that could have easily been number 10.
Same.
One that has come back that we saw together. I saw Cuckoo at
I loved
well, I see
Cuckoo.
Cuckoo. I saw Cuckoo at Fantasia and didn't like it at all. And
I
then
remember that.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
I went with you, and I thought it was really funny, and it really
Yeah.
improved. And I think that's one that's going to keep improving and improving. And at some point, it's probably would have been on my list.
So I liked Cuckoo from the start because of how absurdist it
Yeah,
was. Like if I was trying to describe that to somebody or in the horror bend of it, like what makes it horror,
yeah,
the whole plot behind it, which I won't do here for spoiler reasons, but it sounds so fucking ludicrous and that makes me love it. So I loved how just absolutely absurdist that film was. And it did have a really good set piece. There's a scene in the library scene. There was like some really good scary set pieces within the lunacy.
yeah. And we'll just to list off one that I liked and that I found I was a little surprised with after I watched it that maybe people were a little cooler on. I really liked Love Bites and found it to be
Little
Little Bites.
bites.
Sorry, not Love Bites.
Yeah.
Love Bites was a New Zealand TV show when I was a kid. That's funny that I just referenced that. No, Little Bites really just worked for me. The performance now it does feel at times maybe it is more of a short form kind of thing, but I just really liked how straightforward it was. Just like from the first frame, she's going down and she's letting this monster feed on her to protect her daughter, and I just there's something about it. It's very simple, but I actually think it's a really neat little film.
Mhm.
Obviously, we both really liked Smile too, but it missed out on both of ours. It was close.
Yes. It was close. No, that was a good one. I gotta give Love to Late Night with the Devil,
Yeah.
of
I
course.
assumed it would be on one, but I feel like I should have seen that in a theater. I saw that one
Yeah.
at home, and I think it's just off. But it doesn't need us because it's a very popular one. Um,
I wanted to give a little bit of love to Netflix horrors because they get forgotten so quickly because Netflix does
yeah.
nothing to promote them. It's What's Inside, I thought was really great.
And almost not horror. Like part of
Yeah,
I was
almost.
like almost putting this at 10, but then I was like, it's really pure science fiction because it's more about the funny and the crazy and the body swapping. But either
Yep.
way, it's a very
It
fun
turns
movie. I
horror.
guess it turns dark.
Um,
Yeah.
And then also, it's not a perfect film, but I really this summer enjoyed Under Paris. Like it
Oh
was
yeah.
better than I thought it was going to
Yeah,
be.
it was.
So yeah, as far as shark films go, Shark in the Rhine River, like it's better than I thought it was going to be. Same with Trap. It wasn't perfect. It was better than I thought it was going to be. It was
Yeah.
still a really enjoyable film. I wanted to give a little bit of love to Lisa Frankenstein. The ending didn't work for me,
Yeah,
but there
that's a
was
bit
a
shaggy,
lot.
that one, but yeah.
Yeah. I really had fun with Abigail, but then the biggest kind of takeaway for me that didn't make my list, but I still am just enamored with grotesquerie. There is still so much. And it's again, it's absurdist. It's
Yeah.
absurdist and surreal. And I have read so many reviews of it saying, what the fuck is going on? And I think that makes me love it
Yeah.
more. So yeah, it's super absurdist, surreal, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I loved it.
And I think the new VHS is a very, very strong. Most
Mhm.
of the segments, there's one that just didn't feel sci-fi enough. That kind of takes for me the movie down a little bit, but it's a very good one. And there's a little one that I really like called Black Eyed Susan. Just got a screening last night out here in LA. Very, very dark movie about somebody with a kind of female sex doll, but what the worst male instincts would be to do to that. And it's a very twisted one coming out pretty soon from Vinegar Syndrome. But I just thought it was kind of captivating. But a very good year in horror. I almost put
Yes.
one called Dead Male on. It's one of the better movies of the year, but I'm gonna do what we're talking with Dead Talent Society because it's not getting a real release till next year. So I'm gonna table it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been on my list. So,
Okay, let's take a quick break and we will be back momentarily with our top 10 books, graphic
and this will be
novels,
quick
video
fire, right? We'll
games.
have to do
Yeah,
it much
quick
quicker. Yeah.
fire. Yep.
All right.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, I'll kick off this one because you did the last one, and this one is very brief. My number 10 was an experience. And it's funny because I was so well versed at a horror trivia with you that one of my favorite things this year was going to the horror trivia at the Academy Museum. So the Academy Museum invited me and Brian to host one round, just one round. So we're just doing like the simplest thing ever, right? Like a few questions. But they also said we could play, and so we played with Jackie and Phil from the New Bev and Corey Everett, who's the Cinephile game creator. Who you've played that game before. They
Yeah.
hosted this thing, and I went with no real assumptions, but I know there's a lot of movie nerds going to this thing, and we went there and we won. And I know that sounds like lame, but I think it was the most fun I had all year. Was sitting there, probably with our vested trivia experience of practice at your event, but rolling into the Academy and talking about horror films, and I got to ask an Abel Ferrer question at the Academy. It felt pretty fucking cool. So I'm putting my horror trivia. It happened in October. That's my one event I'm putting on this list at my number 10.
I feel like they should just let you into the
They
academy just
should.
for
I
that.
should be.
Like you just
We won. I'll be like, we won a.
get your academy membership right
I
there.
know that's good.
Okay, so my number 10 is a book, and this is Nathan Ballingrud's Crypt of the Moon Spider. This is the first in a series that's coming. This I'll call horror, science fiction, surrealist, experimental futurism. There's a lot there, but this was just a really tight. It's a novella. You can see how short it is. So I read this like in 2 days, and it's set in this futuristic, well, it's 1923, but it's a different version
Hmm.
of 1923 where we have perfected moon travel, but it's about a woman who is suffering from malaise and to treat, which is depression. But to treat depression in this time period, her husband is a very high powered person. And so to treat it, she is doing what is considered to be kind of the utmost cutting edge treatment. She is flown to a treatment facility on the moon, which used to be home to this kind of like intergalactic giant spider, and it has long since passed away. but the webs that it left are still there. And they've discovered that if they weave these webs into your brain, that it can cure depression. But there's consequences. And this was just, it was really weird. And I love like, where do ideas come from? Like that's part of why I love Cuckoo. Like where did that idea come
Yeah.
from? Where the fuck do you suddenly say, oh, moon used to be inhabited by a spider, but its web cures depression, but let's set it in 1923. Like there was just so much in this that I was like, I don't have a fucking clue where that idea came from, but somehow it works together.
Hmm.
So Crypt of the Moon Spider, Nathan Ballingrud is just, he's an amazing horror writer. His short stories, Wounds, North American Lake Monsters, like he's just got book after book that floors me, but this was something different.
And a listener of the show. So he might
Yes.
have heard that. Yeah, I like his wounds a lot. Okay, my number 9 is the only screening on my list. It's my favorite retro screening, like throwback screening that I went to this year, and that was at the Brooklyn Horror Film Fest. They honored Larry Fessenden, and they screened Habit. The last time I'd seen Habit was on 16 millimeter at Jump Cut before when we played it with Larry there, and that film's obviously played a very big impact on me in general, the kind of movies I want to make. But I was not prepared for just how watching it on 35 and in this capacity, it just knocked me out. It felt like a movie that came out today. It was so alive, it was so electric, and it was a great Q&A with
Mhm.
Jen Wexler, and because obviously they've worked together for a long time at Glass Eye, and it was very honest, all about filmmaking. And the second it ended, this was like a few days before my film played, I walked out of that screening wanting to just go and make a movie. Like just I wanted to leave
Yep.
the theater and go pick up a camera and make something because it was that exciting to me to watch again. And so I had to put that one screening on and it was special because Larry got a special award. And so yes, thank you to the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival. This was one of my favorite events that I made it to this year. So had to put one on. The rest of pretty much books and graphic novels after this.
My number 9 is I wanted to include at least one YA and one middle grade novel as well. So this is my YA. Ended up being one of my favorite books of the year. So Witches We Became, very much YA, where with YA, as I remember, I was talking about this with Adam on our show a couple weeks ago when he was talking about Clown in a Cornfield. There's very little you can't do. So it's still super sexual. There's still a lot of adult content in it. The protagonists just have to be 16. But this is about a group of teen students who are given permission by their parents to rent an Airbnb on this isolated island for the weekend. So a group of co-eds head off to this island. It's the summer before they leave for college. So it's kind of like their beach week, and they head off to this barrier island in Florida to spend the weekend, and just shit starts getting weird. And that's kind of the best I can say without giving any spoilers. It has a real strong witchcraft vibe to it though. So yeah, you can kind of get where we're going with the island and where they've landed on. But this one, just a real tight female 16-year-old witch story. That is So Witches We Became by Jill Bagachinsky.
Hmm,
Hope I said that right.
it's a good cover.
It is a great cover.
Okay, number 8. This was one that really caught my imagination and made me get back into an idea of my own. And this is a book called Daphne by Josh Mallerman, who obviously is pretty well known now because of Bird Box and things like that. This one's from 2022, so it's recent. And I just picked it off Barnes and Noble shelf, went home. It is a high school basketball team, girl basketball team. They're winning this league, and the girls hitting last free throws, and it's the night before their final game in the championship. And one of the girls at like a sleepover tells the other girls this ghost story about this girl called Daphne who had lived in their town before their time, who was meant to be like an outsider, like kind of into heavy metal. She was kind of almost a giant. She was really big and kind of weird, and people had all these weird stories about her. Well, once they tell the story, it now can't leave the girls' brains. They keep thinking about her. And by thinking about her, they basically give her life. And then the book charts one by one. They are being killed and murdered in very brutal ways by this idea of this girl, and it's about this team. So it's about a young girl basketball team. It very much felt to me like the equivalent of like if I was reading It Follows was the vibe I was getting from the book. So it's kind of teen slash girl, small town, but it's got this really dark center of like keeping an idea alive just because you can't stop thinking about it. And the main character, it's a coming of age story, but it's got this really dark backstory to who this girl Daphne was. And I mean, I would have just loved to see make this, like when I was reading, I was like, every beat of it I could see clearly. I think somebody already has the rights and is doing it, but it's to me, it really has the goods. Daphne, Josh Mallerman. Thin novella too,
Okay.
not a big fat book.
I played some Josh Mallerman higher, so we'll see when
Yeah.
I get there. But at my number 8, I have an amazing novella, Mouth by Joshua Hull. Now, Joshua Hull is one of the co-writers of Glorious, along with David Ian McKendry, and he knocked it out of the park with this novella, Mouth. It's equally weird. Like, it feels just like Glorious, and like a lot of other Josh Hull projects. Like, I love reading his stuff. It is about a drifter named Rusty, who is traveling through town, meets this kind of weird guy who says, look, I know you're homeless and that you're looking for work. I can give you enough money to support yourself. I'll give you a place to live, but you have to do something for me. And he says, I am dying of cancer. There is a giant mouth in the ground at my field, and you have to feed it. And as long as you do that, you can stay on my property for as long as you want. And this is all in the first couple of pages. And there is a giant fucking mouth in the ground. And so I just love the absurdity and the surrealness of that setup to begin with. You can read this in a day. It's a fast, fun, weird, absurdist, surreal read that somehow feels really real as well, because Mouth has a character.
Hmm.
Mouth is a character. So yeah, this is just, it's weird and I loved it. So yay, Josh Hall, go.
He has a new book coming out this year, his first like full book, right? Like not novella.
Yeah,
And it looked really
it's
cool.
scary.
Okay,
It's
you've seen
like,
that one already?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's scary. I love seeing Josh kind of drift in this different direction. You can still feel him in it. You still feel that absurdist nature, but yeah, it's a lot scarier than his other stuff.
Okay, my number 7. I hadn't read a lot of contemporary Stephen King in the last 20 odd years. Probably finished somewhere in the early 2000s, and I asked friends for a good rec, and man, this was a total banger, and that's Joyland from 2013. Fucking great book, like amongst his like just most fun to read. It as a college student on his summer break goes down to work at this fair called Joyland, which is kind of like the just whatever fairground park. I don't remember if it was New Jersey or where it was set. And because he's had his heart broken by his girlfriend, and he's trying to like get over it by working at this place, and through it opens into partially obviously coming of age type stories, but one of the rides they believe to be haunted by a girl who was murdered by a guy who had killed maybe multiple people at different fairgrounds, and this person could even be coming back through this way. And the way the story comes by the end, it's very thrilling, and it's just a really easy pulp. This is like the perfect like airplane. Somebody hands you an airplane book, and this is the best possible version. I think it's set in the 50s or 60s. I can't recall. I know it's set in the past. I read it a few months ago, but it was a great read. And sometimes I get put off by the super huge ones of his. And so yeah, really wanted to make sure I gave a plug to Joyland. 10 years after it came out. That's how I do things.
That's how you roll. That's how you get to the reading.
I don't think I'll ever be somebody who's like, I watched all the new, but I don't think that could ever be me.
In 10 years, you'll watch the trailer to Has Been Hotel and you'll
Yes.
be like, wow, Bekah, that was great.
Once it's vintage,
like, I know.
I'll be like, Bekah, this vintage deep cut show you haven't seen. Okay, so that was our number 7.
That was 8.
Okay, my 7.
Yeah, my 8. Sorry, wait, that was your 7?
That was my 7, yeah.
My 7 is The Nasty.
I remember you mentioned.
This is graphic novel, and I'm doing the volume. Like, I think that the actual issues came out during part of 2023, but the bound volume, which is what I usually wait for, came out this year. So John Lee's graphic novel from Vault Comics. It's about it's set in the 80s, and it is about an 18-year-old kid who goes by the name of Thumper, he's obsessed with horror. His friends are all obsessed with horror, and this is in the video nasties era, where all of these different films are getting banned and people are being told not to watch them, that they will somehow destroy your psyche. He has this imaginary friend who follows him around, who is basically a giant slasher. And it just kind of is about his world and some of the most notorious films ever known. And I don't want to get too much into it. Killing starts happening. There's like crimes happening in the background that become more real. But yeah, it's just a beautiful world. And I love it because it intertwines the horror without being, it's not about his horror fandom. His horror fandom is what adds to his character, and then this imaginary character who he talks to. So yeah, it's great. I loved this. The Nasty.
Okay, my number six has led me into a couple books that I've read. It's a book from 1984 called Headhunter by a writer called Michael Slade, and then I read another book by him right after called Ghoul. It's all kind of a series. He's got like 10 or 12 of them. This first one is basically they start finding these heads of women with long black hair on poles in Vancouver. And so they're being put on display, and they have to mount this special. It's basically kind of like watching The Wire. It's like reading The Wire, but a much darker version where they put together a crack team called the Headhunters. That's what their unit's going to be called in Vancouver, and they all have different jobs, different functionality to look for every possible way to try to solve this crime. And it's got this Mountie de Klerk who's like their leader, who's come out of retirement. It just has the opening chapter is set in like the 1800s, and then at one point there's chapters set in New Orleans when one of the darkest chapters I've ever read in any book, like an S&M type, very very bleak scene. But they all come together by the end of who's doing it. But what it's also kind of famous for is it's like you will not know who the killer is till the last page of the book, as part of like its tagline, and it's absolutely true. Like I had a couple inklings, but it wasn't till literally the reveal in the last page where you're like, oh shit, okay. And it's a very clever, very brutal. This is not for horror light. This is probably the most fucked up. And same with Ghoul. The second book might be even darker. And the second book, Ghoul, is not the same cops, but it's the same kind of crime and manhunt happening. Has a Lovecraft bent, that one, but in England that time. So I just bought the third one, which is called Ripper. Is it Ripper? Or is that fourth? But I just got it, and so I'm going to read that probably next. But these are very dark.
What was the Lovecraft one called?
Yeah,
Ghoul?
it's called Ghoul, and the reason it's called it's basically the killer is obsessed by Lovecraft. The killer's left Rhode Island and is killing people in London, but basing it on things from Lovecraft, and believes that Cthulhu is going to come back and change the world, like he's totally deranged. And so that's part of the story. So imagine that, but in a realistic crime book. That it's very interesting. You wouldn't have to read them in order by any means because none of the characters crossed over in those two. I have heard
I'm not
that they do,
gonna.
but Headhunters is really really fucking cool. Um,
Okay.
Headhunter rather. So Michael Slade, and the last thing I'm going to say about it is, and this thing I found out later, is that Michael Slade is not a real person. So the writer is actually three lawyers from Vancouver, I believe, who know every angle of the justice system, who write together. I think there's one guy who's like the main guy, but really they're writing almost as a group under this name, Michael Slade, for the last 20
But okay, I was like,
branches.
the writer is three lawyers. Like
Yeah,
he's three
he
different
is.
lawyers, or like he's environmental and
Yeah.
elder and yeah. Okay, no, he's three
A
people.
lot of other people listening to this who've been reading these kind of books will have maybe know this one already. So, but I was just really taken by how fucked up it was.
Okay, my next one is not fucked up, but I wanted to include one middle grade because I read a lot of middle grade horror because I love it and I get to read it with my kids. And as I have recommended stuff throughout the year, it has made me feel awesome when I get contacted by our listeners saying it felt really good to be able to give my son What Stalks Among Us, or it felt really good to give, my niece this book. So I wanted to include one middle grade book because it's how we make more horror fans. So support your middle grade horror, y'all. And that is Exit Nowhere. This one was a blast. So again, I read a lot of middle grade horror. This one was by far my favorite of the year. It is about a group of kids in this small town, and there is this legendary house in town called the Rathfield Manor. And they decide that they're going to do a history report on it because it's this legendary haunted house in town. And they end up, none of them, they're all forced to work in a group together, and none of them really like each other that much, but they end up daring each other to kind of step inside. And they step inside expecting it to be haunted. But what happens immediately is all of the windows and doors drop like things drop in front of them, they are sealed in, and each room presents itself with a game like hopscotch, or they'll be forced to, do a maze and things like that. And so they're presented with these different traps and puzzles in each one of the rooms. If they get it wrong, they disappear. If they get it right, they get to advance to the next room. And the rooms keep rearranging themselves as well. So it's basically trap for or Saw for 10-year-olds is the best way I could describe it. And it was so fun for me. So, I love the, shove 10 people in a room and make them solve a puzzle to figure out why they're all there. This is that in, middle grade. So exit nowhere. This one was a lot of fun.
My number 5 was Your Birthday Present. Night of the Ghoul. Loved it.
Yes, I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
That's one I've shared this with a few people afterwards. This is Scott Snyder, and one of my favorite artists is that Francesco Francavilla. He does some great movie posters too. And this is the graphic novel, which is about somebody who has tracked down the infamous last reel of a missing movie that has a horror movie that has legendary kind of status. He's tracked down that the director is in some retirement home, and he's with his son, trying to impress his son, like going through a divorce. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna find us this director, and we can find out, more of the story about this legendary lost, meant to be doomed film. And of course they get in there, and then the guy is like, I'm being held against my wishes. They're trying to kill me. They're all ghouls. The ghoul is caught up with us. And I won't say any more than that because there are so many good twists in this graphic novel. It is so my bag. This is kind of thing that when I read it is like, yes, I will give you all the money in the world just so we can make these into movies. I'm sure it's already a movie probably, but
yeah,
I know. I think it's
know that it's been optioned, and I think it's in the works.
But it's so there already. It's like somewhere between popcorn, but a much darker, it's got little elements of that, but then it's taking it to a much more realistic and dark place. But it's really good and really entertaining. So Night of the Ghoul, it was a great birthday present. Thank you.
So another 10 years, you'll read The Christmas Present I gave you a number of years ago.
Yes.
You remember it?
No, it's actually at the top.
My favorite thing is Monsters. Yes, I gave that to you 2020. And
yes, it's very high at the top of my list now. Books that are very big are hard on my wrists. They're very dainty. So
propping up a table somewhere?
No, I used it to beat someone and not leave marks.
No, that would it's a big thing.
No, but that's how you do a telephone. With telephone books. Yeah. But anyway, no, that actually it did cross my mind after I read it. I was like, oh, I've got to read this now because it's like
because there's a second one, and the second one's really good as well. I just got that this year. Okay, in my number 5 spot, I just talked about this one recently on the show, and this is The Strange Tales of Oscar Zahn, which was just a really fun, heartwarming horror graphic novel written by Tri Viong. I'm sorry, I probably said that so wrong. And this started as a webtoon. So my daughter had actually told me about the webtoon, and then from that I picked up the book. And it is about this floating skeleton head inspector who's just traveling through different lands in this supernatural realm solving crimes. But he is just so genuine. There is just something so sweet and heartwarming about this book, because everything kind of has this bigger respect your life and know what your life is worth message to it. That sounds so weird to call this horror novel, so heartwarming, but it just gave me warm fuzzies the entire time. There is a bigger mystery that's evolving over the course of the entire story, but this is just a really good, still horror, still very much a detective story, but a feel-good book that I could read before bed. So I loved this so much. This could have easily been my number 1.
My number 4 is this book that I'd heard of for years as a classic, a classic from early 2000s, and that is Come Closer by Sarah Gran from 2003. It's a novella. It is probably the best book I've ever read about the idea of demon possession, a realistic portrayal of how you could go from where your life is right now, where you feel like you're kind of on top of things or whatever, and how just slowly little thing could it starts with a sound in her apartment that she can't kind of place, and then it's a memo to her boss that has an insult in it that she doesn't remember writing. Then at one point her husband's asleep and she burns him with a cigarette, but she doesn't know why she's doing these little things. And then it starts to going to sleeping with strange men for no reason, and it just keeps building until it's dismantling her life. and she's having this dream of this beautiful redhead woman on a beach who is probably this dark demon that is slowly going to possess her if she allows it to. But the whole time it also holds on to, is this real or is she losing her mind? And it's just totally gets under your skin. I mean, God, it would make almost a great non-horror film. It'd make a great like movie that isn't quite horror but is like in between, because you don't know if the person's really losing their mind. It is.
This sounds like not in plot, but totally it sounds like The Fits, where it's like almost a horror film. Like
Yeah,
there's
but the
something
Fitz hasn't got a
steamy
lead
underneath.
character. Like, yeah, I agree
Mhm.
style wise. The Fitz is all just like looking at various people and stuff. This is like very much this woman who has a husband and has a life and has a successful career. And just one by one, the things start being dismantled, because the more you're dismantled, the more chaos you are, the easier for this thing to basically have control over you. But it's all told from her perspective, the way her brain's thinking about her behavior. It's just so well written. And I had read that this is on a lot of top lists, very thin book, kind of held up as a classic of its type, and I can confirm it really was. It really kind of knocked me out. So that's Sarah Grant's Come Closer.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this has crazy good
Yeah,
reviews. This is
it's
from 2003.
2003. Yeah, I for some reason thought it was from the 90s, but it's 2003. But I guess that's still 21 years ago. So it's like in my brain, it's not 21 years ago, but it is. Very good book.
Wow. Okay, so moving on to my number four is a video game.
Hmm.
I have been playing this particular series of video games for a number of years now, but I've never put it on any of the top 10 lists that we've done, and it really should be because it is definitely, again, I'm looking for gateway horrors. Things that I can
Zelda.
kind of no,
Oh,
it's
I thought
not
you were gonna look
Zelda,
at Zelda.
but I guarantee your boys are
Uh,
playing it. And that is Poppy's Playtime Chapter 3.
okay.
Do they play Poppy's Playtime?
I'll ask them. That one I haven't
I'd
played.
bet dollars to donuts that
Okay.
they do. So original Poppy's
Uh-huh.
Playtime, I had started playing with my son years ago because he asked me to put it on my phone, which means I will never see my phone again. And every single time there is even a remote idle moment, like we're standing in line at the checkout counter, I will get, Mom, can I have your phone? Which is a mistake, but eventually he got his own iPad. But I found that I was playing Poppy's Playtime all the time because he had put it on my phone. The setup of the original game was that you are an employee who has been given a videotape about this this haunted production company. It was a toy production company that was making all of these different toys. And in the original one, which was in the year 2005, you receive a VHS tape talking. It's like all this spliced footage. And then at the end, it's got Poppy, who's one of the characters, and she says, find the flower. And so you travel to the toy factory and you're like going through all of these cursed toys. And it's really freaky. The main characters are Huggy Wuggy and Kissy Missy.
Hmm.
And again, I guarantee that your kids are playing this, Elric. So that was chapter 1. This year they released chapter 3. And chapter 3, it just keeps building on it. This year we got this new character named Catnap, who's just a really fun character. But that said, I wanted to put this on my list because again, it's gateway horror. This is like this is horror video games for my 8-year-old that he finds terrifying. There's this train video game that he's been playing this year called Choo Choo Charles. And so I love kind of seeing these gateway things. But Poppy's Playtime is definitely, it's been a phenomenon if you're 8 or you're a big YouTuber, and it's spreading. I'm starting to see the toys in stores and t-shirts, and I'm feeling like there's probably a movie coming really soon. So yeah, it's a growing phenomenon, but chapter 3 came out this year and it fucking was awesome. It was really fun.
All
So
right.
Poppy's Playtime.
What do you play that on? Which kind of console?
I started on my phone, but like my son is now playing it on, I don't know if it's our Xbox or PlayStation, but he's playing it on a console now. So whereas it started as just something I would play on my phone,
Hmm.
it's definitely kind of moved into more of the console world. So it's expanded.
Okay. Number 3, I actually have a couple now in a row that are from this year, so you'll be very excited about that. One I've talked about them here before, and I know you read it or listened to it, or I can't recall, but it's pretty dense. This was Dan Krause's favorite of the year, I believe, and this is Ill Will, the Dan Chowan book. Very
Yep.
dense read, but very like modern day mental meltdown. Like I think it's a very effective, very literate piece of writing. So it's not like
Yep.
horror, but it does have thriller elements all the way through that keep circling back. It is about two crimes, one very sensational crimes, one is in the past, about 30 years before, and one that is happening now with young college boys are disappearing and their bodies are being found in lakes and bodies of water, and people aren't taking it seriously because they're college guys and they just assume they're like getting drunk and falling into waters. That part is true and based on actual real deaths that were occurring. Your lead character is a Cleveland psychologist who it's really about his family. He's a bit of a fuck up. His family's all kind of fractured, and it is coinciding with his stepbrother or adopted brother getting released from jail for the murder of their parents 30 years earlier, and he's the main witness who had kind of fingered his brother in a satanic panic kind of crime. So that's the past thing. And these two storylines keep interweaving, and he gets pulled into like trying to investigate the deaths of these young teenagers now, these college boys. And for a while, it's hard to see where it's going to start connecting. It's also got a lot of self-deception and a guy who's really a bit of a fuck up as your kind of lead narrator, which makes it, he's not a very likable narrator, so it can be tough. But it's so well written, and that's the thing. I think this writer is obviously just so talented that somehow he weaves this all together to come together. And I think by the end of it, I was really on board and could really see what it was. And again, I wouldn't have read this had I not seen. I think it was just a random Instagram post where Dan Krause said Book of the Year, and so I picked it up. So yes, so that's Ill Will, definitely a very interesting book.
Yeah, it's actually from a couple of years ago.
Oh, is it?
Because I read this during the pandemic, so I want to say it's like it's before the pandemic. But
oh, really? But I thought he said his Book of the Year this year was when I saw his post.
That may have been like the best book he read of the year.
Could be. Okay.
He does what you do. Time is meaningless.
That's true.
It's only content.
That's true.
So yes, with this, it's 2017.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But yeah, this was a great one. It was dense. I remember that. I remember I ended up listening to it because this is one where I started it and was like, there's no way I'm going to finish this reading it. Yeah. And so I ended up listening to it, which was great. But yeah, really tight butt. Okay, which takes me to my number 3, which is by far my scariest book of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not the one that I will say was like my most enjoyable read, but this is one where I was listening to this on tape. So not on tape, on my car through Audible. I don't know if that makes a difference, but this was fucking terrifying. And that's Incidents Around the House, the new Josh Malerman one.
Okay, I haven't heard of it.
Oh my God, this was horrifying. I talked about it the week that you were out, that I had Mark Ward and Bria Grant on.
There you go.
Because we all talked about it and how this is just a fucking terrifying book. It is told from the perspective of an 8-year-old girl named Bella, which sounds like a wild narrator, but it is truly from the perspective of this 8-year-old girl as she's seeing her family kind of fall apart. She lives with mom and dad and grandma. But then there is this entity in the house that she calls Other Mommy. And Other Mommy talks to her all the time and asks, can I go inside your heart? And so Other Mommy kind of like infects her. And so we're seeing this family from the perspective of an 8-year-old, but it specifically is the family's falling apart. Her parents are getting ready to go through a divorce. Their marriage is starting to fall apart. Grandma has her own drama going on. And we're seeing this kind of malevolent thing possess this 8-year-old slowly and try to get more and more control over her. This one is terrifying. It's a haunted house tale, but told in a completely kind of different style that I'm used to, especially with the protagonist. I was really not expecting to like this as much as I did. And again, it was not my like favorite bedtime read. It was not my favorite beach read. It was not my favorite Sunday afternoon read, but this was the one where it's 7 the mornings that I have an 8 a.m. class, I leave my house at 5:45 to get there in time. And so the books that I'm listening to at 6 a.m., they have to be great because I'm not coherent. Half the time I'm just listening to NPR instead. But this was one at 6 a.m. sitting in traffic on the 5 that I was like, fuck, it's terrifying. So Incidents Around the House.
Yeah.
I don't know how this would get made into a movie because so much of it is in the psychology of an 8-year-old. But yeah. So Incidents Around the House, Josh Mallerman.
Wow, he's made it onto two lists. That's impressive.
Yeah.
My number two is my favorite graphic novel I read this year, and it's a brand new one, and it's by one of my favorite artists of all time, which is Charles Burns, who brought us the incredible masterpiece of Black Hole. This is the best thing he's done since then, and I like it almost as much as Black Hole. Black Hole's the surreal story. This is a pretty big hardback one that I got a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is much more realistic. So this is about it feels like it's set in the 70s, but it might be the 80s. It's basically a guy who's just kind of shy, goes to a party. There's a girl he really wants to talk to. It's all black and white. It looks exactly like Black Hole style. Well, actually, no,
What's
this one's
called?
color.
Blood of the
No, this one's called Final Cut. Blood of the Virgin.
Final
That was
Cut.
last year's one, Blood of the
Confusing
Virgin,
Blood of the Virgin,
which I love.
Final Cut.
This is called Final Cut. Actually, this is all color. What am I talking about? It's not black and white. Think of Black Hole. And he sees this girl, and basically they're showing these shot on 8mm home horror movies that him and his buddy have been making, and she's kind of into it, and they're like, oh, you should star in one of them. And so basically they're like, he wants to talk about his feelings, but he's a little bit dreamy. He kind of drifts off a bit. He's just like, it's a very realistic portrayal of friends you've had, and everyone feels real. At some point they go on a camping trip with another couple, and they're going to basically start making this movie. They start shooting sequences, and he dreams, when he kind of gets all spacey, even though he's thinking about it, he starts dreaming almost like Invasion of the Body Snatcher type dreams, and he dreams as this big kind of bubble and this kind of body horror stuff, and sees the girl naked in a pod in his brain, and then he starts drawing it, and she sees the drawings, and she's interested in him, but she might also not be wanting to take a risk because he does seem like a bit of a fuck up. And it's just treated very realistically. It's like a coming of age, but horror kids making horror movies. But I don't know if it's based on a true story that happened to Charles Burns. It has that feeling. It feels autobiographical, even if it's not. And it has him going to movies, like he's watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers in the theater. He's watching the Last Picture Show at one point and trying to explain the plot to these other characters who don't care. They're watching their Super 8 movies. And it isn't like a big plot. There's no big crazy reveal. It kind of meanders, but it's so fucking good. Like I was utterly, and I've read like a few of his that I will like the style of the illustration, but the stories, the last couple of years, he did a trilogy that were like really well done, but I didn't feel anything. This is like up there with Black Hole. This is like artist with a huge comeback, in my opinion. I hadn't heard anyone talk about this one. I just happened to be, when I was at Brooklyn, we went into a bookstore, and me and Webb and I started fingering through the first few pages, and I was like, oh my God, this looks so my bag, because it has like weird body horror things that the guy's drawing and stuff. But again, it is more coming of age. But high blind buy, recommend Final Cut. Charles.
Okay, just added it to my list.
It's really cool. You can always borrow mine if you want. So
this one I had raved about on the show just after LA Comic-Con, because I met the author at LA Comic-Con, and it was a treat. Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees by Patrick Horvath, who he's in the horror zeitgeist. Like he's worked on oh gosh, what was the name of it? The anthology where they're being chased by death through the Southwest. Why can't I remember? The name of it?
The one.
It's not called South by. Why can't I
Southbound.
Southbound. Thank you. Sorry, it's getting late. My brain's going to start leaking out through my ears at some point. But Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, this looks like, if you remember Richard Scarry, remember that it was cartoon books when we were kids in the 80s and 90s, and it was like a town of animals, and like the worm drove a tiger that was like a little apple. It's a whole like forest dwelling of animals. It feels very Mr. Rogers, except there's this bear, and she runs the hardware store, and she seems just as sweet as pie, but she's a serial killer. And so it's about this adorable little forest of cute and fuzzy creatures, and she's a serial killer. But she doesn't kill in the town. She has the rule that in order to not be caught, she has to feed her needs. She can't deny it, or else she'll lose it. So she goes into other cute and cuddly burgs to kill. But then one day, bodies start turning up in her town, and she realizes that there's another serial killer there. And this is just outstanding. It does not pull any punches on the horror. Like it is visceral. Like you ever want to see a cute and cuddly goose eviscerated? This is the book for you. So it really like it goes full serial killer, even though that you are dealing with these kind of animal woodland adorableness. So it's outstanding. Like it's a great book, even if they weren't cute and cuddly creatures. The fact that they are just makes it all the better since you're looking at like a frog family and things like that. So beneath the trees where nobody sees.
Nice. Okay, number one to wrap up our year. We're getting to our number ones. My number one, quite simply, is Ronald Malfi. And
Just him as a
well, I
person.
actually have a book that I'm going to be picking, but I have to say, I read 26 books this year. Oh, 26 right now, and 7 of them are by Ronald Malfi because I'm reading another one right now because I
was going to say, did you get the new one?
I didn't get it, but it is coming to me. No, I picked
it's on its way
yeah,
to
I
you.
picked up one of his ones called Ghost Ridden, which is 400-page stories. Like, so I'm reading that one right now, but I can't explain what it is because everyone has a different thing with writers. The way I read Stephen King when I was young in the 80s and then eventually kind of just grew out of it, like for whatever reason, just changed I became more into maybe more literature kind of type stuff in my 20s. That's what it feels like right now. Like I find him so readable for me. Like I just get into it and then I'm just away, where sometimes I'm on the edge of a book and then I put it down and don't pick it up. I have not been that way, but his first one I read is still my favorite. And I think it is the best book I've read this year, period. And that is Come With Me. So this one's from 2021. That's his newest one this year was a Small Town Horror, which I like, but that one's very King. Come With Me feels very original to me. And it is about a guy whose wife, kisses him goodbye. She goes to the local market. He's turning on the TV and he sees that there's been a shooting at the mall and she's one of the victims. He's like, what the fuck? Like my entire life just changes in a flash. And then he comes home from, and dealing with his grief, going through her stuff, and he finds this little box that she has locked up, and he's like, that's weird. I didn't know she had a lockbox. And he starts opening it, and he starts discovering this other stuff about her. So he's at his bottom of his life with this grief, but then he starts going, huh. And it basically starts realizing she has travel tickets where she went somewhere and a receipt from a motel she went to. And of course, the first thought is, oh, she's having an affair. But then he starts realizing, no, this is more insidious. And he starts to realize she was tracking down a serial killer, but he doesn't know why. And she never brought it up to him. And he has no clue what the context is. He just has these oblique clues to girls who have been gone missing. And why is his wife, was she tracking this down? So he takes it upon himself to try to finish what she had started. And he starts going down this road, but with way less information than she had, obviously, by going to the motel. And it gets so good and so exciting. It feels like it'd be more like a series like The Outsider than just a movie because of just the structure of it. But man, this one is still my favorite of all his books. In terms of just like as a read, but I've liked everything I've read this year. And it's also pretty good because this is my number one of the year. It's good to know that he's also our first guest in January.
He's our first.
He's going to be our first guest. I can't think of somebody I'm more excited to ask horror questions about their movie taste because obviously I'm reading all the literature, but I'm very curious what movies he's into. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan. I would also highly recommend people read like Bone White is really, really good and really dark if you're looking for another one. But Come With Me is a great entry point, I felt, to get into it.
I'm adding that. So I've read Small Town Horror, but I have not read Come With Me.
Yeah, Come With Me. I think it's just like, I like mystery. I like it when there's a mystery element because I think it just keeps me going because I need to find out. And I think you would too. It's got a true crime vibe to it as well.
I'm adding this because it feels like one that I will listen to in the car.
It would probably it'd probably listen pretty well there. Yeah.
Like this will carry me through some shitty traffic. It's not my number one, but I did one murder mystery this year that I really liked called Murder Road, which was Simone St. James. And that one was really tight. It was ghost, but murder mystery at the same time. But thus, taking me to my number one is a video game. So I don't talk about video games a whole lot on the show because frankly, I had to get out of them for a long time when my kids were young. And it doesn't even come up like anybody who's been following my career at Fangoria for, decades at this point. Long before I started doing podcasting, I actually worked as a beta tester for a while and I signed books of NDAs, so I can't cite specific games, but especially during the late 2000 aughts into the early 2000 teens, like I was beta testing games, which was awesome. And so I used to work a lot with some of the video gaming companies out of New York. And then I had babies, and suddenly I was a very impulsive video game player who would start at 7 o'clock at night and would play straight till 4 a.m. and then wouldn't be able to stop. And when you have like an infant, you can't do that. So I definitely fell out of it once I had kids and was not playing nearly as much. And so, but they have brought me back, which is the beautiful thing. So last year, I know I put the video game Cult of Lamb on my top 10. This year, I included Poppy's Playtime, which is another one of my kids. But because they wanted a PS5 so bad, I had gotten them one. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to get myself some fucking games too. So I got the new Silent Hill, which is amazing. But my number one non-horror film thing, horror film thing of the year is the brand new Alan Wake game, Alan Wake 2, because God damn it, I'm right back to where I used to be. This game is outstanding. I played the first Alan Wake game years ago and it was amazing, but this one, I'm right back to that kind of impulsive playing where I start playing. I will start as soon as we're done tonight. And I will have to force myself to go to bed at midnight because I have to be up for, faculty meetings bright and early. I love Alan Wake because it's a murder mystery. So you're solving a murder mystery that has a supernatural bend. This particular one, it opens with an absolutely brutal killing that you are part of. It's like one of the quick kind of playthrough cold opens. And then it transitions into an FBI case where you are researching all of these deaths surrounding something called Cult of the Trees. But you know that there's a supernatural bend because these weirdo things keep happening through the game. This thing is fucking terrifying. That is what I love most about it. I can look back and think at moments in my life when video games have actually scared me. And this has left me kind of jump scared many, many times. So Alan Wake 2, you are my number one non-horror film TV show thing of the year. I will do quick honorable mentions.
Before you go, can I ask,
go ahead.
Because like with games, as far as the last time I was playing game, how similar is it to NBA Jam?
Not.
Oh, okay.
So
that's the last game I played, I think like 95.
Was that like 95?
Yeah, but I was really good at it. I don't know if that counts as anything. I don't think I've ever played I've watched people play the more like horror-based games. I've never.
I love survival horror. Like, with I like the Left 4 Deads, the Dead Space, just all of those. I feel like loved them.
I must have, I don't know what I was doing with
Resident
my 20s.
Evils. I was playing Silent Hill is exactly what I was doing with my 20s. Yeah. I was playing a lot of Silent Hill. So yeah. And the new one for PlayStation is amazing.
Maybe I'll play. I'll have to go to someone's house and play again.
No, this one has been, and I mean, Until Dawn, the one, oh gosh, what was it called? There was one from the same people who made Until Dawn that they did a couple of years ago, not the Caverns. I can't remember.
Shouldn't you have a Steam account or is it Twitch? What is it when people watch you play games and pay you money?
That's Twitch. So Steam is an online gaming platform. Okay. Like I play games on Steam. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, the kids.
Yeah, like I like Steam games. Like when I was shooting in Canada, I was using Steam because I couldn't watch television. Like none of my streaming services worked there, but my Steam account still did. Like I couldn't do Netflix or anything because it was all international, but I could still use my Steam account. So when I was shooting in Canada a couple summers ago, I ended up getting super back into gaming during that time because it was the only one of my platforms that worked. But yeah, so Steam's a gaming platform where you can download all different types of games. Twitch is where you watch other people play.
All right, Bekah on Twitch 2025, make it happen. You can
no,
you can
it's
wear
not.
a headset and do like little videos.
So here's how bad I am at socials. I made the goal for myself that I was going to make 24 TikToks from Thanksgiving to the end of January or end of December. I was like, I'm giving myself basically like a month and a half. I have a month and a half to make 20 some TikToks. I think I've made 3 so far, which is better than my track average.
And it's going to get canceled anyway. The whole TikTok's probably dead. So don't worry about it. You'll be fine.
So I'm going to give.
I need less social media. But though we should mention Blue Sky. We should mention that we're on Blue Sky now.
Oh yeah, we are on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Two quick book runner-ups. My Darling Dreadful Thing, and this is all I'm going to do is just say the title and show it. Gothic horror, really great. And I also really enjoyed Rachel Harrison's new one, So Thirsty, is a vampire novel. I had covered a couple of hers. I covered hers 2 years ago. My favorite one of hers was The Return. But this is her brand new one. She had one last year called Black Sheep that was pretty good as well. So those are my book honorable mentions. But hey, I released a comic this year. So oh, look, Elric's holding it.
I really liked it. I read it. You sent it to me
Yeah.
because it was sold out. I read it about a week ago, and it was very much my kind of thing, like weird cosmic desert horror. And I had
That's
no
it.
idea what was about to happen. And then there's like creatures and freaking like looking at you from the weird drains, and I was like the vents, and I'm like, this is the good shit. So I'm very much looking forward to more.
Issue number 2 comes out on January 8th. So please
Cool.
hit your local comic book shops for that, or you can get it offline. No, we did well with the first one. It sold really, really well.
Nice.
Like we were sold out all around LA, which was fantastic. When I had this dream that I was going to go to House of Secrets, which is our local one here in Burbank. And I was like, and I'm going to record video of myself buying my own comic. And I got there at like literally like 3 o'clock on the day that it released, and it was already sold out. And I was like, well, if I can't make my video, that is the best fucking
Yeah, that
reason
should have been your
to.
TikTok.
So
Did you not make it
I
TikTok?
know.
My God,
I
this is
did.
how bad you are
I'm
at TikTok.
terrible.
That's like
I'm gonna have to hire you as
That's
my
just-
social
yeah.
media manager, and it's just gonna go downhill.
hire
from
the
there.
person who's never been on TikTok to make you to advise you. All right.
You got your first one today, though. I saw.
What
I
was it?
saw the email. So, for the Nosferatu album, I saw the.
I did.
you
It
had
wasn't
to
a
do a
TikTok, but I
post
did
on
have
it.
to do a social media post.
It was brilliant.
And then you'll be proud of me because the second after I posted it, I drove straight to our friend's Dick house and gave it to him as a present.
Aw.
Because me and you couldn't both get a
Very
copy. I
sweet.
felt like, hey, got to make it fair. But
Dick
he
deserves
deserves it.
Dick, he
A little
deserves
Nosferatu.
it, so.
Anyway, so you have heard our top 10 horror movies TV of the year. You've heard our top 10 books, graphic novels, video games, miscellaneous,
Video games.
Malfi miscellaneous. It has all been laid down. It was an incredible year of movies and of experiences for both of us. It was a real, it's amazing that we pulled through and kept the show going somehow. I'm not sure how we pulled that off, but we did. And we're going to take a couple weeks off, and then we'll come back, and then we'll see what happens in the new year. You know, we like to see what happens.
Yes. We will be back, not the very first week of January, the second,
somewhere.
and we're having Ronald Malfi, and Elric's gonna go like full fanboy on
Probably
him,
will,
it's gonna be
actually.
great. Yeah,
But that's okay. I'm very curious.
that's what we're here for.
Exactly. And yeah, thanks for all your support, all your listening. And we have one more episode of Deep Cuts coming out that we'll record before we're on break. And check it out. Hopefully we will have seen
Thank
Nosferatu
you.
by then. But it depends if we
Yeah.
get in or not. We'll see.
Yeah, it's gonna be a line, but thank you all so much. Have a great holiday. The Colors of the Dark podcast is a Fangoria production. Producers and co-hosts are Rebekah McKendry and Elric Kane. Executive producers are Tara Ainsley and Abby Gould. Sonic branding by Michael Rodriguez. And, of course, our amazing sound engineer, Ernie Hurtado.